Shalom, family. It's your brother Benaiah Ben Israel. And can I tell you something? This is something epic. The first of its kind. A monumental event of historical proportions. You see, the African Israelite Justice Foundation is hosting an event in Charleston, South Carolina, November the 15th through the 17th, called the My History, My Heritage Empowerment Summit, in partnership with Gullah Geechee Tours, to provide a once-in-a-lifetime conference experience. On November the 15th through the 17th of this year, Israelites all around the world will gather where the sun turned into darkness and the moon did not give her light, and the sign of the Son of Man did appear in heaven. The My History, My Heritage Empowerment Summit will offer historical tours both day and night by the one and only Gullah Geechee Tours. We also plan to offer authentic Gullah Geechee cuisine by the granddaughter of world-renowned Gullah Geechee cuisine chef, Emily Meggett. We also plan to host a beach or park Sabbath day service and fellowship, culminating with an African Israelite Justice Foundation conference in the heart of Charleston, on the historical grounds of an African Israelite resting place with a replica ship and a plantation house. You see, to know where you're going, you have to know where you've been, and learn how we can repair the breaches in the walls of Jerusalem together, and help defend our heritage, our history, and by the grace and mercy of the Most High Yah, be empowered to victory. Hallelujah. Well, family, come on out and join us in Charleston, South Carolina, November the 15th through the 17th, and be a part of this unforgettable weekend where history, heritage, and empowerment converge. Well, hope to see you there, Israel. Take care and shalom.
What's going on, family? Let me shut this office door real quick. What's going on, family? Soon I will have my setup with my camera and my mic very soon. Right now, I'm just playing it by ear with the laptop that I have. So, family, I wanted to bring everybody here. We want to sit down and talk about the events that's about to happen, the event that's about to happen, which is the upcoming election. With the upcoming election, and y'all, like I said, I'm trying to get my camera so y'all can ignore how I'm looking right now. I'm at my mom's house. But with the upcoming election, we want to kind of delve into the toxic relationship between U.S. politics and black people, meaning Black Americans. And I want to bring a couple of people on who could provide insight into it. I know my screen is grainy, y'all. I have a very good camera, but I just don't feel like setting it up right now. But I wanted to get into how that came about and get into the conversation of, I was doing some research and realized that during the Reconstruction after slavery, Black people had a very good position at that time to be a part of U.S. politics. And some people don't realize that Republicans that we know now, that was the party you supported back then and you were a part of. It was the Democratic Party that was considered to be racist. So we were part of that. And then we had a major part in the Reconstruction when it deals with in the South. Because at that time, the Confederates were, I ain't gonna say they were blackballed, but they were not as much engaged at that time. So the Black people were kind of pulled in at that time to kind of take that place. and how that shifted later on, as it progressed, how many racist communities and groups who did not want to see the um the upward mobility of the Black community, how they came in and they added their own spin to it, which ultimately led to Jim Crow. People don't realize that, and how we were never able to have true access to the political parties. So I want to bring a group of individuals that can provide insight into their thinking patterns when it comes to the toxicity of these relationships between U.S. politics and Black people. Black people have always tried to be involved in politics, but in one way or another, sometimes Black people felt like they were. I want to say we're seeing now the aftermath of how we always thought we were involved, but to an extent, we're still not getting benefits from the U.S. politics. We don't have an agenda. We don't have anything going before a president to say, "Hey, look, if you get into office, this is what we need for the Black community." And we've kind of strayed away from that, and they've used our own people to make us stray away from those conversations. So let me start bringing people up here. All right, let me start with what's going on, J Mac. He probably eating. He can't hear me. So I'm moving on. What's going on, Gardis?
Sister E, what's going on?
It's going on. How you doing?
Oh, there go Jay.
Jay got it. He eating right now, y'all. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing as good as I can. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
This is my brother from the Berean days. Oh,
Yeah.
this is my brother from the Berean days. People don't realize that before I did Sister E Fars on my own, I was on a channel called Berean TV, and we used to do Sunday seminary around this time every Sunday.
Yep.
And we would be on Berean's channel talking about things like this, about the Bible, about politics, about the Israelite. The biggest thing at that time is started shifting towards the Israelite community. So
yeah, we got a long history.
We got a long history. So I'm glad to have you on. Let's see, who else do we have? All right, we got a newcomer that's on our channel. This brother is a minister out of Tennessee. His name is Brother Charles Johnson. I had a great opportunity to meet him during my my time in Clubhouse, which I've kind of taken a little break from because I want to be more focused when it comes to my channel. But what I love about this brother is, regardless of the fact that I call myself an Israelite, he understands that I'm a believer. And with me being a believer, we kind of agree on when it comes to the concept of oneness. And also, we come from the same town. So this brother has been so great when it comes to providing insight when it comes to the concept of oneness. Being on Clubhouse, the way he conducts himself on Clubhouse is completely opposite of what I've seen thus far. So I have a lot of respect for this brother. So Charles, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
Oh, well, glad to be here, Sister E. Of course, you and I go way back like the 8-track and the fifth wheel on the Cadillac. The golden days of Clubhouse, which I feel is probably behind Clubhouse right now. But Sister E and I go back to the golden days of Clubhouse. So we've been on there for a long time. And it's an honor to be here with you, my dear sister, to discuss these very relevant topics to our people in these United States of America. And it's very important that we understand our history and where we've been in this country so that we can begin to chart a way forward. My politics are fiercely independent. I believe that Black people don't have any place in partisan politics. If we're going to get anything out of these people, it's going to have to be us united together as a conglomerate and moving as a unit. And all it takes is 15% of us or 18% of us.
Yeah.
That's enough to entice the Republicans, and that's enough to scare the Democrats. And if we could ever get to that place where we have enough of an independent voice, people will be shocked the concessions that we can get from these two parties.
Yes, people don't realize how much the Black vote can shift an entire election.
Yes.
And we never truly utilize that power of that shift because we're too busy arguing amongst each other. And we're arguing amongst each other and not really seeing the big picture. And my biggest problem is we go to these meetings, these conversations with Kamala and those conversations with Trump, and never provide the Black agenda. What does the Black community need overall? And we always make our agenda secondary to everybody else's. I grew up in politics my whole life. You know, me and you from the same town. So I grew up around the Harringtons and all those individuals because I was just around it. My family
Yeah,
was in
King Willie.
King Willie, yes. So I grew up around it. And I grew up around these politicians my whole life because of my parents' interaction with politics. So because of that, I got to see the other side of it. And I tell people, I said, some people, when we're dealing with our people, everybody isn't bad. Everybody's trying to do things from a local perspective, but when you're fighting things from a federal perspective, the local doesn't have that much power because they can do as much they can within their own cities. But when you're fighting with things from a federal perspective, it doesn't be able to reach a broader audience. So, and being honest, my mom and them used to always think I was going to go into politics, and that was just not my calling. That was just not. I'm not that much of a people person when it comes to that. So, but thank you, Charles, for jumping on. Let me see. So I got one more brother up here. His name is Abdul. So Abdul has a history. He interacts a lot with me and Santonio. He's actually Elder Wiggins' cousin. And he provides great insight when it comes to the Black community overall. So Abdul, what do you got to say for the people?
Peace and blessings. Well, let me turn on my camera. Peace and blessings. How you guys doing this evening? My name's Abdullah Barker. I'm just a humble servant of the Most High. And I come from the ghetto, and I got a little bit of politics in the background and whatnot. And I just have a little bit to say, you guys. Just a little bit, not much. That's about it.
So let's kick this off. We'll wait for everybody else to come on. I'm ready to kick it off. So one thing I did want to talk about is the Reconstruction era. People don't realize how important that Reconstruction era was within the Black community when it comes to politics. That was when we were coming out of slavery and we began to have a voice within politics. So I'm going to play a quick video, and then after that, y'all can chime in. I know Minister Charles, you got some videos, and I know Gardis has some videos. So if you have some, y'all let me know and I'll queue it up. But I do want to start here because people have to understand where we started to understand what's going on now. So I'm gonna play this quick video, y'all. This is like 8 minutes long, and then we can chime in there. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna share this video. I had to get past the commercials. Oh, let me say this real quick before I get hit with the fair use strike, because I ain't got hit with a fair use strike. So let me do this real quick. And once we get done with this part of business, we can actually get started with the show. So my fair use tag, and let me say this. So far as copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, new reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. So now, fair use, I put that tag up, and we can actually get started. And I want to get y'all's insight on this, and then we can kind of get started into deeper conversations. So let me.
The power of AI to build the website you need.
People don't realize that African Americans have always been a part of this nation's democracy. Black people always strongly desired the right to vote. They've always fought for being included in the political process. And then also, I think a lot of people might take for granted that African Americans always get to have that right, because we had it before and we lost it. And so, presumably it could be lost again if people don't fight to protect it.
When we learn about the Reconstruction era in school, it's often taught as a dark period in American history, a time of upheaval and unrest right after the Civil War. But what often gets overlooked is that for a brief period of time, thousands of Black representatives were elected to office all over the South.
My estimate is that there were about 2,000 African American men who held public office during Reconstruction. Offices ranging from the Senate, there were 2 Black senators, 14 members of the House of Representatives, 600 or 700 members of state legislatures, and then dozens of other offices, state level, local level, etc.
So what was going on was that, first of all, a lot of the former Confederates, the most outspoken leaders of white supremacy, were not allowed to serve in Congress. And so, with those people absent, there were people that did believe that African Americans should be folded into the fabric of American civil and political life, and that did advocate for Black people to be able to vote. And then, of course, when African Americans were prevented from voting, federal troops or federal investigators would often be called in order to protect those African Americans' rights in order to cast a ballot.
The Bush Guide, cold and smooth survival skills.
Hello?
Should you become stranded, be ready to signal rescue.
At the time, many states in the South were either majority Black or close to it. And because of that, they were able to elect Black legislators, especially at the state level.
The most significant accomplishment of Black legislators in many Southern states during Reconstruction was the establishment of public school systems, not only for African Americans, but for white students as well. And even though these were segregated, they were often the first time that many African Americans, fresh out of slavery, had an opportunity to learn to read and write.
The highest level of office reached by these Black legislators was the U.S. Senate, and the first was Hiram Revels, a U.S. Senator from the state of Mississippi.
So Hiram Revels was a pretty unique individual in that he was educated, and he later became a civil rights champion, before the Civil War, certainly during the Civil War. And then afterward, he was sent to Mississippi, where he was appointed by the state legislature to be a United States Senator. In response to Black political power during Reconstruction, the South was just rife with violence in every single Southern state.
So I'm pausing right here because this right here, you begin to see, and y'all can provide insight, you begin to see the birth of Black Americans and African Americans at that time that were coming out of slavery and had the opportunity to add insight to the political party, because obviously the Confederate Party did not have access at that time. Because you got to realize they were still kind of divided. But with that, it was like a newness to it, and how that newness ended up turning. And you're going to begin to see how it began to turn, and it went from a Reconstruction to where we'll proceed into Jim Crow, where they were implementing laws like you had to be able to read a certain way, or they had to be able to read, had to be able to write to be able to vote. They were implementing laws to ensure that the black person did not have access to voting. Any insight y'all want to add to it?
Oh yeah, well, I'd like to add that's what Abraham Lincoln in the Gettysburg Address referred to as the quote unquote new birth of freedom. And it was that new birth of freedom that would eventually end slavery, make all of the former slaves into citizens with equal protections under the law, which is the 14th Amendment, 13th Amendment into slavery, and then ensuring the suffrage or the voting rights of those newly minted American citizens vis-a-vis the 15th Amendment. So Amendment 13, 14, and 15 to the Constitution are the so-called Reconstruction Amendments, and they were created specifically for Black people to ensure our freedom from slavery, to ensure our equal protection under the law as citizens, and then finally to ensure and codify our right to vote, within the Constitution itself. And it was these Reconstruction amendments that, as you look at down through American history on into the modern day, have been repurposed and reconfigured by the Supreme Court to apply to all sorts of other ethnic groups. Equal protections under the law recently applying to gay people who want to get married, when, of course, the amendment itself had absolutely nothing to do with anything of the sort. But once again, this gets back to the topic here of the troublesome relationship Black people have had with American politics. You will notice this repeating, revolving door over and over again of something being created exclusively for the use and benefit of Black people, and then by and by being adapted and being twisted around and being remixed and repurposed and reapplied to go toward benefiting all sorts of other ethnic groups and minority groups and aggrieved groups, and getting completely away from the main idea, which was to benefit Black people.
Correct. And most people don't realize how it shifted. Well, people realize it, how these things have shifted with all these different bills that they created and how people have utilized it. And it's so interesting that, and we're going to delve into that later, how Kamala said, I'm not creating anything just for Black people. When you've created bills in the in the past for, hate, Asian hate, you got the anti-Semitic HR bills that say you can't say anything and you're going to pretty much lose everything. How each bill for each group has been created, but when you get to Black people, we have to share everything. Gardis, anybody, Jay, y'all got anything to add to that?
Well, a lot of what Brother Johnson said was correct in regards to that. When you look at that period of time coming out of slavery, because the big question with the government was what are they going to do with these newly emancipated Black folks? And so with that, a lot of us had the wherewithal to not just run for office, but they've also built cities and towns for themselves out of the aftermath of the Civil War. Because for those who read the histories, when the Confederates lost, I mean, they were basically devastated. A lot of them left their plantations empty. And so it was us who basically just, took the remains of it and started, building cities. I mean, you look at some of the cities that were raised in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, they came from Reconstruction because the people that were there decided, well, you know what? We're here. We have the resources. Let's go ahead and build our own towns and build our own communities. And then from that point, you started seeing governments being led by us, by Black people. And so we generally took advantage of this situation in the South, where we were able to have autonomy of our governments because of the fact that the Confederacy was broken up and it was defeated. And like I said, a lot of them left their plantations, and many of them actually went down to Mexico to kind of like help the French, because during that time as well, the French was occupying Mexico, trying to basically trying to take control of that country. However, they were defeated, and their plan was to kind of reinstitute slavery in Mexico and come back and possibly start a second civil war with some of the Confederates that fled down to Mexico. But since that had failed, it was an opportunity for us to build these cities and take over these governments during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody said something, and it's very interesting right here. It says, our people understood then we had to do for ourselves with our people. We weren't confused about the importance of having our own community, foundational establishments. And I think that's a very important point, because coming out of slavery, we understood that we had to build communities for ourselves. and it goes into that Reconstruction phase where we were trying to be more engaged when it came to the political parties. But when we go here, it's going to show you a shift that ended up where at one time we were embraced to say, bring your points, to now we're going into the era where it proceeds to the Jim Crow era. So and I don't want to miss everybody's video. Once we get done, I know Gardis and Carlos, I said Carlos, not Carlos, but Brother Charles got some great videos as well. So I'm gonna get through this fairly quick. So I'm gonna play this.
Oh,
go ahead, Jay.
No pine on this one real quick. And also I got a couple of short videos after those brothers play theirs, if that's okay.
Cool.
I want to say to the sister's comment, I agree, but what people don't understand is black people coming out of coming out of slavery were forced to depend on each other. We had no choice. We had nobody else to work with. We had nobody else to build alliances with. If that makes sense. I mean, there were some abolitionists, but there wasn't enough abolitionists for us to build coalitions with to build. And we all and I know you're leading up to post Reconstruction, but I just wanted to make that point, because when black folks did build their own Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood, had thriving communities, what happened? Jealous white people came in and destroyed it. And it had nothing to do with political parties. It was just angry white people don't want to see black folk with anything. And I wanted one more point. I land on this. I want people to realize that the Republican Party in the 1800s, that were basically those who were basically abolitionists. They were the progressives at the time. You guys got to realize they were not conservative. They were progressives. There's been a flip. So I'm gonna leave it there for now. Go ahead, sister.
I hope I know one of y'all gonna come up with the flip when it flipped, because that's very interesting to flip.
I got that covered. I think Gordon's got a little bit of that too. So we got that covered. Yeah.
Okay, let me play. I'm gonna finish. I'm gonna try to hurry up and get through this because I want to give everybody an opportunity. But the great points so far.
Most obvious early example of that violence was the Ku Klux Klan, which did all sorts of different things, but attacked everything from school teachers to politicians to farmers. And so these different waves of violence really popped up, especially during election days. And so in 1875 Mississippi, there was an organized overthrow, essentially, of the state Republican Party, which did include African Americans. There was violence at the polls in different cities, and that spread throughout the entire South. 1876, there was violence in different places like Florida and South Carolina and Louisiana that led to contested elections that ultimately paved the way for Reconstruction to end.
That overthrow was not put into law really until another generation, let's say around 1900, when Southern states figured out ways to abrogate the 15th Amendment, which had been enacted in Reconstruction to guarantee Black men's suffrage.
So once the 15th Amendment became law, Southern states couldn't disfranchise African Americans simply by saying Black people are no longer allowed to vote. And so in response to Reconstruction, in order to eliminate the Black vote, they had to come up with new ideas in order to make sure African Americans were taken off the voter rolls. And the most powerful of those methods was the literacy test, which allowed for local registrars in a county courthouse usually to look at a candidate and give the candidate a literacy test to see if they were qualified to register to vote. The nature of the test usually didn't matter. The person would just define whether they were qualified to vote based on whether they thought they were white or Black.
And so you had a period, from 1900 to the 1965, the Voting Rights Act, where very few African Americans were allowed to vote throughout the entire South. For a long, long time, Reconstruction was portrayed by scholars, but also by the teachers and the general public as sort of the lowest point in American history, a period of corruption, misgovernment, and this idea that Reconstruction was a disaster was part of the legitimation of the old Jim Crow South. The underlying message was the South was correct in taking away the right to vote from Black men, and that if Blacks were given the right to vote again, you just have another replay of the horrors of Reconstruction.
But I think one of the things in American history that we often teach is that there's a constant march toward things getting better. And it's a little bit tricky to teach Reconstruction because, you know, African Americans during Reconstruction could vote in much of the South, and then things actually got a lot worse. And so it doesn't really fit into this narrative of constant progress throughout America since the Civil War. And so, you know, in this day and age where we have numerous African American senators, just look at a place like Georgia where Raphael Warnock was elected. And, you know, white Georgians are largely trying to respond through tactics like voter suppression to tamp down the Black vote after the Black vote largely sent this African American man to the United States Senate.
After the 2020 elections, we saw historical voters of color turn out and a lot of first-time voters, even during a global pandemic. And after that, we saw Republican-controlled legislatures across the country drop hundreds of anti-voting bills. And so when we saw that collective activity happening, we had to go to the federal government and ask for protections.
Hillary Hawley works for Fair Fight Action, an organization working to fight voter suppression around the country. Though literacy tests remain a thing of the past, many states have enacted laws that purge voter rolls in ways that target minorities, or have made voting more difficult by closing polling places in largely Black areas. Fair Fight is now working to get legislation such as the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed in Congress to stop these tactics.
So we started working with Congress basically right out the gate in January 2021 to help ensure that the legislation was drafted in a way that could actually mitigate voter suppression and combat the real attacks that we're seeing in real time.
Even though today's laws might be a bit different, they're intended with the same, outcome in mind, to make it harder for Black people to vote, to make sure that African Americans don't have equal standing of one man, one vote in the democracy in order to ensure more white control over our political systems. I think it's important to learn about Reconstruction in American history because that was a moment, I think, where our democracy held the most promise for every single person, at least every single male, in the history of the United States of America, regardless of race. And I think that if we are to ever really fulfill that promise, then people need to understand the history of voting rights and voting right loss in the Reconstruction era.
That's all I have for that one. But I mean, it's just an interesting time during the Reconstruction era. They never really talk about it. They give a dark light to the Reconstruction era, like as if it was a horrible time within the South. And really, that was the time that I think Black people had it was a peak far as us being involved with politics. And I don't think we've ever gotten to that place yet, ever again. Even now, I think a lot of our decisions, and I said this yesterday, when it comes to the polls and going to the polls and voting, it's never about the Black community, but it's the fear that's put in us to say, you better vote for Kamala because be afraid of what Trump will bring. Why be afraid? Let me ask Trump the questions of what are you going to bring to our community? So I think back then it was not a dire need to vote because of fear. It was more so I'm involved and I want to see the construction of my community, where now it's just I'm afraid. Let me rush and vote for somebody. I don't care who it is, but if it's not Republican, I'm good. So I'll step back and I'm gonna let everybody else, because I know everybody else got videos that they want to show. Anything y'all want to add to that?
Well, yeah, I wanted to just quickly chime into what you just said. I do believe that Trump is an existential threat to our constitutional republic, to our form of government. His plans to, as detailed in Project 2025, which of course he denies, but we know that he lies. So since he lies, we cannot believe him when he denies, because he's probably telling a lie. But as a part of Project 2025, the agenda is to fire hundreds of federal employees and replace them with people loyal to the president. That's dangerous. Him pursuing immunity at the federal level for local law enforcement, that's dangerous. So, based upon those two items alone, Trump's got to fail. And even if he succeeds, he still might not be able to accomplish what he's trying to do. There's no guarantee with that. And yeah, I know, I just saw the comment. I know all of them lie. I don't even think that that's the point that I'm making. I'm not saying that Kamala doesn't lie or won't lie. I mean, Kamala's a prosecutor. so I mean, those folks lie for a living. But what I am saying is that we have rarely seen a politician with as loose of a relationship with truth and facts as Donald Trump. I mean, anytime I had bigger crowds than Martin Luther King. I mean, really? Your crowds were bigger than the 1963 I Have a Dream speech march on Washington. You're out of your mind. You had a bigger crowd size than Obama, who had a historic presidency in 2008, being the first black president in American history. People voted for Obama that would never vote again. People showed up for Obama that would never show up again. And you had a bigger crowd size, but of course, crowd size is something petty. But if he'll be that disconnected about something as petty as the size of a crowd, there's no chance of him telling you anything that's accurate. I mean, so let's not get it twisted. Yeah, they all lie, but this man's relationship with the truth is as far removed as any. I mean, he's even worse than Bill Clinton. That depends on what your definition of is. I mean, he's well beyond that. He's well beyond Bush and Iraq weapons of mass destruction. I mean, he's beyond Richard Nixon. Your president is not a crook. I mean, name your lying politician, because yes, they all lie.
Yeah.
But Trump is a liar beyond anything we've ever seen in our lifetime, and also beyond anything we've ever read about in a book.
Yep. God, let's go. I see you unmuted, so come on.
Yeah, so I mean, I do agree with Brother Johnson. Also agree with the commenter about they all lie, but as with Brother Johnson's point, his degree of lying is much more.
It's rocket fuel,
basically, and it has a much more deadly effect on the people than, say, somebody lying about the unemployment numbers. I mean, take a look at how he handled the pandemic, and I think for my money, I think that's what actually lost him the election in 2020 is his handling of the pandemic. And so with all of the lying that he did during that time, up until after a couple of 100,000 people had died of this virus, he kind of started centering himself, but he there still was kind of like a resistance of being completely truthful about this pandemic. So yes, his degree of lying is very fatal when you think about some of the stuff that he says. And yeah, just like the previous speaker said, I've never seen it before. Maybe there have been presidents that have said that before I was born, but in my lifetime, I've not seen a president like Mr. 45 lie and also cause a lot of suffrage and harm and even death with his lies.
I think the whole thing with Trump, and everybody knows I love politics. Politics has always been something I've been very intrigued by, and it's the psychology behind the politics. Keyword is liar. They have the ability to finesse a group to think of a certain way without providing facts. Great example. You brought up the unemployment numbers and how Biden and Kamala and all of them have pretty much talked about how our employment numbers have gotten better. But just here recently, news have come out that they said that those numbers were incorrect. In fact, on a monthly basis, they've had to amend those numbers. So the thing is, they can tell people something and don't have to provide facts. Great example. Kamala got on stage, and I'm pretty much like open. I listen to everybody, and I really watch the Democratic National Convention because I love the psychology behind the like I said, the politician itself. They have that charismatic attitude. Kamala said a lot of things, but did not provide insight. And I noticed how the audience was swayed by saying that Kamala is going to do these things. And then at the end of it, they had an aftermath conversation. I noticed nobody really understood what she was talking about as far as the changes she was planning to make. But everybody is just election time is very interesting to me because you start seeing people sway towards their biases without any insight. And that's what I'm seeing right now, even on the Republican side. You see that people are diehard Trumpers, but yet and still they can't tell you what plan that they have in place to get everything back at a stable level. You're in a position right now, we're in the midst of possibly going into another war. You have an economic situation where we've never seen numbers this bad before, where the unemployment rate is very, 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 very high. And then you're dealing with inflation and increased interest rates. Now, inflation and interest rate has more to do with the economy and how the economy is driven, but it does play into politics some kind of a way. But yet it's just so interesting to see these conversations and how people are swayed regardless of what's going on around them. Everybody just love Kamala. And my question is, Kamala's saying that she wants to do all these things, but Kamala's already in office. And that's the question I have for the people. Like all these things that she says she wants to do, it's not like she's not physically there to make a difference. Why aren't these things that you're speaking of implemented now? When people are being an AKA, graduated from Howard, collard greens in the bathtub, I'm just like, y'all get too caught up in the foolishness and just not what's going on. So,
well, let me ask you, because you guys touched on quite a few things. I'll be quick. To answer your question, Sister E, directly, a vice president doesn't have the power of a president. Vice president is really a puppet of the president, to be honest with you. I mean, we can see already based on how she's campaigning, how her and Tim Walz, are putting out their ideals and what they want to do. A lot of it differs from what Joe Biden's platform is. So I'm pretty sure you've been around for a while. You've never seen a vice president buck their president, in other words. So what could she do that while she's in office? Can she have some influence on the president? I'm sure she has. But ultimately, it's up to Joe Biden what he is going to do and what he's not going to do. I'm interested to see if she's going to come in, if she wins. I'm interested to see if she's going to come in and pull a Ronald Reagan on Netanyahu and say, hey, you ain't getting no more money until you stop it. That's what Ronald Reagan did.
She does it. I'm very shocked if she does that.
Well, Jay, I got to push back a little bit on Kamala just being the puppet.
Give me 1 second, brother. Let me finish, and then you can.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
When I say puppet, I mean that vice presidents don't have the power to make the decisions. They're at the behest of the president. That's what I'm getting at. I don't mean she's like some kind of slave or something. Okay. But I wanted to say, when you guys were talking about Trump being a habitual liar, I mean, it's easy to fact check and see that he is. He just lie about anything. It doesn't matter. You can say it's raining outside. If that dude doesn't like it to be raining outside, he'll come out and say it's sunshine and rosies and puppy dogs. But the only thing I've seen close to in my lifetime, this being this level of gaslighting is the Bush administration gaslighting us. And your mic is open, Sister. I don't know if you know that.
I'm sorry.
Okay. It's the Bush administration gaslighting us on Iraq. Oh, that set me off. And I didn't even vote for Bush, but I didn't have a problem per se. I know people were mad about Florida, but I was like, okay, we got to move on as a country. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't have a problem with him being president, and I wanted to see him succeed. But I will be 100%. That whole gaslighting us on Iraq sent me over the edge because I'm not stupid. You know, Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11 and all the other nonsensical reasons that they came up. So I just wanted to say that was one of the things that the Bush administration is the closest I've seen in my lifetime to this level of gaslighting by a president and his administration. Well, go ahead, Gordis.
Yeah. So, I think still with Kamala's position as vice president, correct me if I'm wrong, she is the Senate pro temp, right?
Yes, the vice president is the president of the Senate.
Yeah, so I think that's a very important thing, especially when issues, especially with like when issues come up. Remember that whole January 6th thing when they were trying to, when the Trump faction of the Republicans tried to overturn the election. Well, it was they tried to blame who was Trump's vice president again?
Mike Pence.
Mike Pence.
Yeah. They tried to hang Mike Pence. Hang Mike Pence.
Exactly. And there was a reason why they said that, because of the fact that he didn't go along with that whole election fraud. And so his position as a president pro temp could have basically changed it and actually challenged the election of 2020, and we probably would have wouldn't know who the president was for the next like couple of months. If he didn't side with the people who accepted the election results. So
I get what you're saying. And I'll land real quick, Brother Charles. That's a constitutional issue because Pence said he went to former federal. I mean, he went to federal judges. He went to people who were experts on the Constitution to see if there was any merit to what President Donald Trump at the time was trying to get him to do. So that's a constitutional issue, and he basically fell on the side of the Constitution versus what Donald Trump wanted or whatever. I'm saying as far as policy goes, Kamala Harris, if Biden came out and said something crazy that was unconstitutional, I would hope that Kamala Harris would have a problem with that publicly as well, but I'm saying as far as policy goes, I don't think you're going to see a vice president go against policy of a president. I'm interested in what Brother Charles got to say about that.
Yeah. Couple of points here, gentlemen. Number one, the president of the Senate, being the vice president, they only cast the votes when it's a tie. That's the only time they cast a vote. They break ties. That's all they do. So if there's not a tied up vote, then they don't even have a vote. They just basically are there to preside over the proceedings. And that's exactly the constitutional role of the vice president in the certification of an election. All they do is preside over the tally. They don't have any power to input, change, delay, alter anything. They literally have no power. And this is why I refer to the vice president as the backup quarterback. That's exactly what a vice president is, the backup quarterback. If there's no injury, if the president can't be in the starting lineup, then that backup becomes the starting quarterback. But other than that, under normal circumstances, that starting quarterback is the starting quarterback, conducts the offense, runs the team how they see fit, and the VP has no real constitutional power at all, not even as the president of the Senate, with the rare exception of casting a tiebreaker vote. Now, to the comment that I just saw on the screen, what about Cheney? Now, Cheney is one of those rare instances. He's one of those rare instances where the president gave power to the vice president. So he basically put Cheney in charge of organizing the war in Iraq effort, the war in Afghanistan effort, put him out there as the face of the foreign policy, which normally that role is reserved for the Secretary of State. But you had the vice president on the news, doing interviews, being the public mouthpiece for the administration, which is, as I said, normally the role of the Secretary of State, normally not a VP role. So you do have, rare exemptions to what I'm saying in the case of Dick Cheney, but that's only because the president ordered it so. So his power, to the degree that he has any, flows from the president. He does not have any constitutional ability to act with independence. And I know that's a Trump talking point now. Well, you're talking about what you're gonna do if you get in office. You're already in office. That's just preying on people's ignorance for not understanding how the government works. As I said, the vice president is the backup quarterback. I use football analogies all the time because, well, football is life and life is football. And I hope y'all fantasy drafts are going well. I had 2 yesterday. I got 2 next Saturday. But my main point is the vice president is the backup quarterback. That's it.
But you got to realize.
Can I make a correction? I think I said Senate pro temp. I didn't mean that. That's incorrect. What Brother Johnson said, the vice president is the president of the Senate. So I just want to make that correction.
But you got to realize too, on the other flip side of that, even though they are the backup, they still have some level of influence. That's just like a CEO and a COO. When you look at a corporation, CEO makes all the decisions ultimately, but there is a level of consultation between the CEO and the COO in a corporation when decisions are made. So I don't want to think that the president is not making decisions without consulting their vice president. That means that people are operating in silos. So there are conversations that need to be had. Now, Cheney is different. My mom used to always make this joke, and it was true though. Cheney was handpicked by Bush's father, Big Bush, because that was Cheney and Big Bush, Daddy Bush, were buddies. And pretty much people have always made the rumor that Cheney was handpicked to help Bush Jr. because Bush Jr. still didn't totally understand the demographics when it came to running a country. So yet and still they say Daddy Bush was still in the background making decisions through Cheney by way of Bush Jr. because Bush Jr. they just didn't trust him.
I'll go say, Sister E, you know why Daddy Bush did that, don't you? And you kind of answered the question because Junior wasn't the brightest bulb in the box.
He wasn't. So
and I didn't think I would ever see anybody. I don't want to disparage. I didn't think I would ever see anybody as not as bright as Bush, and then Trump came along.
Yeah, but Bush Jr. was scary. So Cheney was there to just kind of police because Daddy Bush still had, I'm going to be honest, when Junior Bush was in office, Daddy Bush still had control through him and Cheney. Junior didn't do anything outside of what Cheney would approve pretty much. And I still say this, I think Cheney was running the country more than Bush Jr. was.
Yeah, and that's an opinion. We don't really know whether or not it's true.
Yeah.
But according to the Constitution, that's what I'm going by because the Constitution is the law of the land, literally.
Correct. I agree.
And so according to the Constitution, the VP has no real power. Like I said, with the rare exception of casting a tiebreaker vote. If there's a tied vote in the Senate, they break the tie. Kamala did that to help y'all get the stimulus checks, if you recall. Some of y'all want those stimulus checks.
I don't want to assume that the vice president is just sitting in the wing and the president is making all the decisions and not consulting the secondary person that's in charge. But that's just my assumption. But we still got to look at the fact of, and I don't want us to stray off the point of how this political system has been toxic to the Black community. I want to get into y'all's videos, but we got to still bring up the big thing that's coming up is border control. Border control is one of the biggest issues that's being something that's being discussed and being one of the talking points for each party. Who was the border czar? Her. And I'm not saying that she implemented these laws, but there are a lot of situations right now. I live in New York. I see what's going on with the migrant situation. I know Gardis probably see it from his end of the world. The migrant situation is out of control right now. There's not a corner that I turn in Manhattan or in Brooklyn where I don't see a group of migrants taking up the whole block. That's how bad New York is right now. New York is in a situation where citizens are being robbed coming in and out of Central Park. Central Park is not an area where you get robbed. I'm gonna be honest, people assume New York has a crime issue. New York really doesn't have a crime issue that I've seen, but I'm from Memphis. Memphis is a little bit different, but New York doesn't have a serious crime issue. But we're seeing these waves of crime events that we've never seen since I've been in New York, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that the U.S. is a sanctuary city. If she's the border czar, that's going to be a talking point for Trump to bring up. If he had sense, he would probably bring that up. I think he has, but he hasn't dwelled on that as much.
Well, the problem, Sister E, is that Joe Biden never appointed her or used any kind of word such as border czar. The Republicans made that up. She was given a specific task to negotiate with certain countries like Venezuela and some other countries where people were coming from to try and get them to stop some of their people from coming here. But as far as going down there and being control of the border, that was never the function that Joe Biden gave her. So I think
she actually was. She was a point of that was one of her duties, to handle the border crisis. And we can't
no. What I'm saying is part of her. Okay, so what I'm saying is she was given specific duties for as immigration was concerned, but controlling the border was not controlling the border, which is the president's job. That was not what she was given.
Yeah,
look that up.
Yeah, that's controlling the borders, the purview of the Department of Homeland Security vis-a-vis the President of the United States. And so no policy is going to be on the border that's not coming directly from the office of the president. So he has the jurisdiction there. As Brother J. Mac accurately pointed out, I believe that this can be fact checked, but as he accurately pointed out, she wasn't named the border czar or anything like that. She was just given specific tasks to perform. And once again, that's the prerogative of the president to give the vice president certain tasks, as Bush did Cheney. So so the backup quarterback can be on the sideline with a headset on, maybe even calling some plays or making some suggestions or implementing the offense. They do give backup quarterbacks stuff to do, but as far as being on the field, they're not on the field at all. They're not in the field of play at all.
We can't take any of the responsibility off of us. We don't want to make it seem as if she was just a person that was just sitting there doing nothing, even though he did give her distinct tasks. I'm not taking away from the president being the one that's in control, but yet and still with the COO, he has certain tasks he has to fulfill. She didn't fully fulfill it. Because the thing is, one of her tasks that she had to do was implement some forms of border control. It was not totally on, I want to say, Biden to own that piece of that particular, I want to say, that realm. It was part of her duty. So we don't want to sit back and make it seem like Kamala was just sitting and chilling and let Biden run everything.
Yeah, and I'm not saying she was sitting and chilling, but what I am saying is that the border policy, literally controlling the border, that comes from the office of the president. It does not come from the vice president. So we can't really equate a vice president role with a COO role.
Correct.
In a company that does not correlate. The vice president's the backup quarterback. That's the most accurate. That's the most. No, the COO is not the backup CEO.
Technically, if the CEO does not be able to fulfill his duties, the COO is usually the voice piece, and I've seen in most cases that the COO and the CEO usually are the ones that interact the most. And I would say the CFO as well. So you can't say that the COO is just sitting there making a decision. He deals with the operational model just like the CFO deals with the financial piece. He gives them a task and say, we need to get budget under this. Guess what? The CFO has to fulfill that by building the budget, building the plan. COO has to build the operational models that he may want to implement. So we can't say that Kamala just sat back and he said, these are the policies, follow through, Kamala, and walked away. Kamala had to build some type of plan and implement it to say, this is what we're going to do to build border control.
Right. That's not how the presidency works. That's what I'm explaining. The presidency doesn't work like a CEO. A CEO is responsible to the shareholders of the company. The shareholders can have a vote. They can remove the CEO, get another CEO.
Mm-hmm.
It's not how the presidency works. The executive branch of the federal government is one man.
It is one
woman.
man.
It's one singular person. That is the executive. Everything in the executive branch reports to that one singular individual. If I'm the president and you my vice president, I don't have to consult you for nothing. I can sit you on the shelf and I can make 100% of the decisions because the Constitution does not require me to confer with a VP. You only do what I let you do or what I tell you to do. And you only work with policy as much as I allow. I am the only one in charge. That's how the Constitution has set up the executive branch of the federal government. The VP has no real power. That's what I'm saying.
But yet, and still, you still have a position because now we're talking about as if the president is a dictatorship. When you're dealing with and somebody just said this, and I was about to say this, the cabinet can vote and remove him, just like the stakeholders can remove a CEO. A president can be removed from his position if the cabinet can vote and ultimately remove him from his position. A president is never meant to be someone that's in power without having the public to make the decision to say he's in or he's out. Because now we're getting into the place where the president can be literally a dictator.
Well, the president is the dictator of the executive branch. It's one of three branches. The check on his power doesn't come from the VP. The check on his power don't come from the cabinet. The president can say, hey, Department of Education, Secretary of Education, bye, you fired. He can do that. They all. So the president is the dictator of the executive branch. His power is only checked by the Congress and by the Supreme Court. So the analogy that you're making with, for example, and let me quickly explain this, the 25th Amendment, his cabinet can't just get together and remove him. It don't work like that. He's got to be terminally unable to perform his duties. Like he's been shot, he's hospitalized, he's physically or mentally incapable of performing his duties. That's the only way the 25th Amendment kicks in, where the cabinet votes to remove the executive. That's the only way.
But
there's literally no other circumstances in which that can occur.
And I agree with you on that point. I don't want to make it seem like we disagree. Ultimately, I'm not saying that the president has to consult anybody. The president ultimately can make the decision to say, this is what I want to do about the border control. But yet and still, he still has to give that duty unto the vice president to say, this is how I need for you to do this. And that person still, because you can't negate from the fact that Kamala still had a task to handle and implement border policies that she was somewhat in charge of. And I've done that research myself to figure out that,
No, I said, yes, you did. And I actually dropped I'm going to drop it in the chat too. I dropped it in the back, in the private chat. And if I can read just one paragraph from that, if that's okay. Okay. It says, this is a political fact check on what Harris was actually asked to do versus what people are saying she was doing. So it says, but Biden didn't put Harris in charge of overseeing border security. In a meeting with Harris in March of 2021, Biden said Harris would lead U.S. diplomatic efforts and work with officials in Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras to stem migrations to the U.S. Migration to the U.S. Biden says that when he was vice president, he got a similar assignment, and that the Obama administration secured $700 million to help countries in Central America. So basically, she was sent out to go negotiate with those countries to say, y'all stop all these people from coming here.
Correct.
Right.
And that's the point that I was making.
So that's having some conversations. That's not enacting policy.
Not necessarily. Let me rephrase. I'm not saying that she's enacting policies. COO can enact policies. CEO can. But the thing is, there was a task that was given to her to interact with these different countries when it dealt with border control, to say, look, stop doing this, stop letting these folks come over here, and work with other states when it gets into the Texas and California, to see what we can do to control the border. That was still her task, and we can't take away from that. That was still her task. Did she fully fulfill it? Do y'all think
Yes, she did fully fulfill it, because all she had to do was have some conversations with these people and try to negotiate, hey, what can we do to help you to lower the number of people that are coming here? Her role was to have conversations. And therefore, if I had the conversations, regardless of what the results of the conversations were, if I had the conversations, I fulfilled that duty.
Wow. So you can let's have another conversation. I don't want to throw us off topic, but yet and still, even with those conversations, there still was supposed to be conversations within, I want to say, the other powers within our own country as well, meaning with the state officials, dealing with the governors. Great example, Texas, dealing with all these individuals to ensure that we implement border policies to keep individuals from coming over, making sure that we had enough headcount when it came to border control. One of the things that I noticed that they kept saying that it was a low headcount for people to handle border control. Now, people may not have wanted to work on the border, but if you saw some of the videos, and I did some reading on it, there were not enough bodies there to support border control. So we can't sit here and make it seem like that Kamala just sat there and everything that transpired was not something that she could have had some level of influence in. Because if that's the case, there's no need for a vice president. What's the purpose of a vice president?
Once again, the backup quarterback. If the starting quarterback go down, the backup come in there and become the starting quarterback. That's the purpose of the vice president. She's the backup quarterback.
It's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, we can have a deeper conversation. I don't want us to throw off the conversation. I agree with you to a point, Carlos. When I say Carlos, I mean Charles, but I don't agree with you.
It's the Spanish. It's the Spanish.
Well, that's my name in Spanish, so that's fine. That's my name in Spanish.
I don't agree with that. She just was supposed to just sit there and be a backup, and she didn't have anything that she was in charge of, and she needed to handle. So we can go deeper into that, but I don't want to throw us off topic about the toxic relationship between the U.S. and Black people. So, but I have to stand down. I agree with you on some points, Charles, but some things I just don't agree on. All right. So whose video is next?
Garnet, you want to go first?
All righty. So, when we're talking about this toxic relationship with Black people and U.S. politics, one of the things that we talk about, and I think Jay was going to talk about the Southern strategy. This happened in the 60s. I believe it was right before the 64 election, where Barry Goldwater got a lot of the Democrats who were still in the South, who was the party of the white supremacists, to switch over to the party of the white supremacists, but they switched over to the Republican Party, which we kind of see in its corporate formation today. And so in this whole process, one of the things that I thought took interest in was what happened 60 years ago with the Mississippi Freedom Democrats, which was formed by Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker, and I believe Bob Moses as well. During that time, the Mississippi Freedom Democrats, which was comprised of mostly Black people, but also, a couple of white people who were in support of civil rights, attempted to vote. And as with the Jim Crow laws, as with the aggressive white supremacist violence against Black folks who tried to vote, they were either turned back or killed. So what they did was they formed this party called the Mississippi Freedom Democrats to send to the Democratic National Convention. And so in this whole process, they wanted to replace the Mississippi Democrats, who were still the white supremacist Democrats of that time, because of the fact that they wanted to testify at the DNC how they have been suppressed, how they have been violently pushed back on their voting rights. And Fannie Lou Hamer, who is very much known in the civil rights era, was one of the main spokespeople of the Mississippi Democrats. And I think this speaks to a lot of the racial violence that has been taken amongst Black people, especially political violence that has been taken upon Black people for as long as this country has been alive. So do I share my screen or do I put it in the chat?
Let me see. Did you already? Let me see. Share your screen, and then I have to. Let me see. Oh, I got to stop sharing my screen. Hold on.
Didn't they change this process from like a couple of years ago? The last time I think I shared anything on StreamYard.
No, that's all you gotta do is share. Once you share it, I have to share it.
Okay, hold on. Let me do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to present this video. It's a speech that Fannie Lou Hamer did at the DNC in '64, which is approximately 60 years ago, and it was very poignant and very relevant, actually, to our time, at least to me. So, give me 1 second here. I think I got to share the sound too.
Yes, share the sound too.
Okay. Okay. Can y'all hear it? Can y'all hear it?
See if you can do full screen. The little squares on the side. Yep. I don't think you're sharing the sound. Or is it any sound playing?
Yeah, there is sound playing. Hold on. Let me
Or you can send me the link and I can share it for you.
Okay, that's what I'll do. I'll send you the link.
Yeah, when you share a video on StreamYard, it's gonna be a little box that you got to check to make sure that the sound is shared as well.
I thought I did that, but I guess I didn't. So
Let's see. And y'all don't worry about me and Charles. Me and Charles argue like this on Clubhouse all the time. Ignore that. There's no.
Oh yeah, it's a regular thing. No love lost at all.
I know some people are like, why they are? It's like that's normal Clubhouse right there. Let me see. Here we go. Oh shoot! Hold on.
Mr. Chairman, and to the Credentials Committee. My name is Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, and I live at 626 East Lafayette Street, Roosevelt, Mississippi, Sunflower County, the home of Senator James O. Eastland and Senator Stennis. It was the 31st of August in 1962 that 18 of us traveled 26 miles to the county courthouse in Indianola to try to register to become first-class citizens. We was met in Indianola by policemen, highway patrolmen, and they only allowed 2 of us in to take the literacy test at the time. After we had taken this test and started back to Roosevelt, we was held up by the city police and the state highway patrolmen and carried back to Indianola, where the bus driver was charged that day with driving a bus the wrong color. After we paid the fine among us, we continued on to Roosevelt, and Reverend Jeff Sonny carried me 4 miles in the rural area where I had worked as a timekeeper and sharecropper for 18 years. I was met there by my children that told me the plantation owner was angry because I had gone down, tried to register. After they told me, my husband came and said the plantation owner was raising Cain because I had tried to register. And before he quit talking, the plantation owner came and said, Fannie Lou, do you know, did Pap tell you what I said? And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I mean that if you don't go down and withdraw your registration, you will have to leave. Said then if you go down and withdraw, so you still might have to go because we're not ready for that in Mississippi. And I addressed him and told him that I didn't try to register for you. I tried to register for myself. I had to leave that same night. On the 10th of September, 1962, 16 bullets was fired into the home of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Tucker for me. That same night, 2 girls were shot in Roosevelt, Mississippi. Also, Mr. Joe McDonald's house was shot in. In June the 9th, 1963, I had attended a voter registration workshop, was returning back to Mississippi. 10 of us was traveling by the Continental Trailway bus. When we got to Winona, Mississippi, which is Montgomery County, 4 of the people got off to use the washroom. And 2 of the people to use the restaurant. 2 of the people wanted to use the washroom. The 4 people that had gone in to use the restaurant was ordered out. During this time, I was on the bus. But when I looked through the window and saw they had rushed out, I got off of the bus to see what had happened. And one of the ladies said it was a state highway patrolman and a chief of police ordered us out. I got back on the bus, and one of the persons who had used the washroom got back on the bus too. As soon as I was seated on the bus, I saw when they began to get the 5 people in a highway patrolman's car. I stepped off of the bus to see what was happening, and somebody screamed from the car that the fire workers was in and said, get that one there. And when I went to get in the car, when the man told me I was under arrest, he kicked me. I was carried to the county jail and put in the booking room. They left some of the people in the booking room and began to place us in cells. I was placed in a cell with a young woman called Miss Vesta Simpson. After I was placed in the cell, I began to hear sounds of licks and screams. I could hear the sounds of licks and horrible screams. And I could hear somebody say, can you say yes, sir, nigga? Can you say yes, sir? And they would say other horrible names. She would say, yes, I can say yes, sir. So I said, she said, I don't know you well enough. They beat her, I don't know how long. And after a while, she began to pray and ask God to have mercy on those people. And it wasn't too long before 3 white men came to my cell. One of these men was a state highway patrolman. And he asked me where I was from. And I told him Roosevelt. He said, we're going to check this. And they left my cell, and it wasn't too long before they came back. He said, you were from Roosevelt, all right, and he used a curse word. And he said, we're going to make you wish you was dead. I was carried out of that cell into another cell where they had 2 Negro prisoners. The state highway patrolman ordered the first Negro to take the blackjack. The first Negro prisoner ordered me, by orders from the state highway patrolman, for me to lay down on a bunk bed on my face. And I laid on my face. The first Negro began to beat. And I was beat by the first Negro until he was exhausted. I was holding my hands behind me at that time on the left side because I suffered from polio when I was 6 years old. After the first Negro had beat until he was exhausted, the state highway patrolman ordered the second Negro to take the blackjack. The second Negro began to beat, and I began to work my feet. And the state highway patrolman ordered the first Negro had beat to sit on my feet, to keep me from working my feet. I began to scream, and one white man got up and began to beat me in my head and tell me to hush. One white man, my dress had worked up high. He walked over and pulled my dress. I pulled my dress down, and he pulled my dress back up. I was in jail when Medgar Evers was murdered. All of this is on account of we want to register to become first-class citizens. And if the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off of the hook because our lives be threatened daily, because we want to live as decent human beings in America? Thank you.
So that says a lot in regards to our struggle with American politics. Ms. Hamer, basically all she was doing with her party and the people who were supporting her party was just registering to vote. And this is, what befell upon her. Now, she said this speech, like I said before, 60 years ago at the DNC. What was interesting was during that time, Lyndon Johnson, who was the president at the time, because he was the vice president under Kennedy, and he was the acting president at the time running for re-election. It was said that the speech was being covered nationally on TV, and it was cut off by President Johnson because he knew, I guess he got word of what she was going to testify, and he didn't want that out. So it was actually cut off. So luckily somebody had got a full recording of it and kind of posted it. But I mean, that says a lot to, some of the suffrage that we go through. And what I thought was very important was when she was talking about when she was in her cell and, she had two black people in the cell and they beat her on the orders of the police. And I find that very symbolic of how we do each other in the name of American politics, in particular with those who have gone to the Republican Party. Now, don't get me wrong, there are Democrats, black Democrats out there who would want to beat somebody, but I think these polarizing politics, what they do is when we get so entrenched into it and we get into a state of submission to these politics, we would actually beat our own people over the head for the sake of these politics that in a lot of cases don't even serve us. So when Fannie Lou Hamer decided to form this party, they were just basically trying to get what she called registering as first-class citizens, not even voter. She didn't even use the word voter. She used first-class citizen. And I think that's the importance of why our right to vote was very important, because it technically was supposed to make us first-class citizens. But, you know, as we see from that point up until now, we're still fighting to be first-class citizens. And so I think with this, it's important to understand that these politics that we have, or the politics that we have to deal with as Black people, with the Democrats and Republicans, which I, kind of call the duopoly, because while I don't call them the same, they have very similar platforms. They do it in a different sense, but I'm very careful to say that they're both the same, because I know that's a nice catchphrase to use, but I think there's some nuance to this conversation when we talk about the Democrats and Republicans, because despite the fact that most of us are Democrats, we still have to deal with the racism that happens in that particular party when it relates to us, because I think a lot of it is it's not an equal level relationship, but more of a paternal level relationship. And we can go back to the Republicans, who were the abolition, the abolition party during, pre-Civil War. Even that relationship was more paternal, because despite the fact that they were trying to fight for the liberation of Blacks that was in enslavement, most of them still believe that as a society, white people should be on top and Black people should be on bottom. If you read the presidential debate with Abraham Lincoln against Stephen Douglas, he said it himself that if there was a hierarchy, he would have to assign white people on top and Black people would have to be on the bottom. And he even said too, if his whole purpose of going to war with the South was to preserve the Union, and if keeping slavery was to preserve the Union, then he would do it. So in a social aspect, there still was a patriarchy with the Republicans back then. And I see that with the Democrats now, whereas there's no real social upliftment, even though they're not as fascist as the Republicans. But at the same time, we have to deal, with this issue of the Democrats having this lopsided relationship with us.
Yeah, and I think, and you brought up that one of the things that I caught, and you were talking about the Democrats in reference to the overall relationship with the Black community, and that's what I'm seeing, and that's what I'm getting from what you're saying, and how I guess my biggest question is, and maybe we can delve into that. When did that shift happen? When did that shift happen to where at one time majority of Black people were Republican, and it shifted over to majority of the political party shifting over into the Democratic Party? Because when you look at the Reconstruction phase, a lot of the individuals, when you're dealing with the Klan, they were majority Democrats. When did that pendulum shift? And I guess that's the question.
Yeah.
Lined up.
Yeah, I can speak to when maybe it began to shift, and this was with the Great Betrayal of 1877, where Republican presidential nominee Rutherford B. Hayes was in a contested election, one of the few times in American history where there were two candidates so close that neither candidate reached the necessary electoral votes to secure the presidency. in which case the presidential election is then thrown into the United States Congress, and the Congress votes and elects the president as the president-elect. And so that's when the Republican Party betrayed Black people. So they basically took Reconstruction and threw it in the trash. And Reconstruction is actually when Black people made the most advancements of any time in American history. And Rutherford B. Hayes agreed that upon becoming the president-elect, when he assumed office, he made a deal with the Democrats who controlled the Congress, that should he be elected president, he would, as president, remove the federal troops from the South, which would effectively end Reconstruction. The reason why Black people made so many political advancements was because the Black vote was being protected by Union troops in the South. And once those troops were removed, then the South essentially was retaken over by the Confederates in all but name only. And that was the rise of the Second Klan, which is the most devastating and brutal iteration of the Klan in American history. And that's where all this strange fruit began to pop up. And anti-lynching laws were always defeated at the federal level for decades and decades. And so because of that betrayal, a lot of Black people stopped supporting the Republicans. And one of the greatest Black men ever lived in this country, Frederick Douglass, referred to it as the Great Betrayal of 1877. And once the Great Betrayal happened, Black people become disjointed politically. And although there's still a lot of Black Republicans at this time, politically, when the Democrats do civil rights in the 60s, is when a lot of Black people began to move over to the Democratic Party. And President Lyndon B. Johnson, when he does the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, working hand in glove with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., this is what has a lot of Black people, of course, coming over to support the Democratic Party because they did civil rights. And Barry Goldwater, of course, senator from Arizona, who was a Republican Party presidential candidate. And when Goldwater ran for president, he opposed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which led to even more Black people abandoning the Republican Party. And so this goes to show you that what the person at the head of your presidential ticket does can have a lasting effect on the party. And so that's when a lot of the Black people began to support the Democratic Party. But I just want to say here briefly about Grand Elder Fannie Lou Hamer's speech there, which, as was correctly stated, was preempted by President Lyndon Johnson, trying to get her off the airwaves from she was sharing too much of the business. As the old racist white folks used to say, you sharing too much of the business. But let me just say, the level of opposition that they received for merely attempting to register the vote shows you the power of the vote, and that our enemy understands the power of the vote. This is why you need to vote, folks. Some of y'all may be in the comments. I see some people speaking against voting in the comments. Listen, the enemy knows the level of weapon that vote is. That's why they had such severe persecution on par with anything you read about in the Bible that the prophets went through. Anything you read in the Bible that Jesus went through on the cross. This is what was inflicted on our elders and grand elders in this country for merely attempting to register the vote, because they knew that the power was in the vote. Our enemy saw the power of the Black vote immediately after slavery, when all those Black folks went to Congress. And then, in fact, I want to briefly mention, of course, the only successful coup d'etat in the history of America, the 1898 Wilmington, North Carolina coup, where a duly elected government was overthrown by a white mob. That was January 6th, before January 6th. And it's the only successful January 6th in the history of the United States of America. So this just goes to show you the level of resistance that the enemy is giving you. is letting you know the power of that vote. And that vote still has that power today. We have to realize that our only way forward for upward mobility and advancement as a community in this country is through the power of the vote. And I wish our people would stop demonizing voting. Like, we got to stop the cap. We got to stop the foolishness. We got to get on board with the program.
I think when you said that makes sense. But I think you got to also deal with, and that's the title, the toxic relationship between U.S. politics and the Black people. The vote itself, when you look at the overall gambit of how that has benefited Black Americans overall, we've always been the first one at the voting poll, but the last one being a discussion point. And I think that's that toxic relationship that we got to speak to. When we are the first ones to support candidates, when we're the first ones that are a spokesperson, Republican or Democrat or independent, we've always been the first ones there. But we are the last persons that they want to talk to about implementing policies to support the Black community. And I think that's why Black people now have such a toxic relationship with U.S. politics. Now you see a wave of Black Democrats moving over to the Republican Party, only because they're looking for somewhere to say, when is the Black agenda going to be fulfilled? And you can't stray away from that.
Yeah, but I mean, the problem is that in order to be successful in any negotiation, you got to have leverage. Mm-hmm. So leverage is what we're missing. And that's why my plan that I articulated earlier, getting about 10 to 15% of the Black vote to be truly politically independent and organized, so that we will give this 10 to 15% chunk of the Black vote to whichever candidate meets our list of 5 demands. I mean, you literally got to go in here and strong arm these folks. They only recognize strength. They don't recognize begging. I'm not talking about begging. I'm talking about entering into a discussion with leverage. And if we come up with, this is the Black agenda, you got to keep it short, sweet, and simple, 3 talking points. These 3 points are the 3 pillars of the Black agenda. And whichever one of you candidates, Mr. Trump, Miss Kamala, whichever one of you candidates meet these 3 things, 10 to 15% of the Black vote going in block vote for you. And in fact, it helps even if it's strategically placed Black voting, meaning that if it's strategically placed in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Atlanta, Georgia, for example, in these purple states where a small percentage of the Black vote can swing that state one way or the other, I guarantee you that that's enough to entice the Republicans and scare the Democrats. And if we can enact what I'm proposing or some variation of it, we will have leverage to come to the table, and these folks will have to talk to us. The only reason why they don't talk to us is because they don't have to talk to us, because we got no leverage.
When you got
truly politically independent can give us the leverage that we need to get what we need, which is what I believe to be reparations for the descendants of slavery and Jim Crow.
And the thing is, I think reparations has been a discussion point. You had Claude Anderson. I love following him, and he's tried to have those type of discussions to kind of figure out how can we collectively come together and figure out how we can proceed with that conversation of reparations. We've gone to the UN. There has been some level of representation at the UN to say this is what, and this is more of a United Nations standpoint to say, how can we proceed with the concept of reparations? But guess what happens? We don't want to talk about reparations. That's not a discussion point. Dr. Claude Anderson, I know he has struggled that, just not with the political parties, but with our own people, to make that a talking point, because ultimately it's treated as if that's not something that we need to discuss. Now, I do agree with you, Charles. There has to be a concerted effort to come to a round table, to come to an agreement, to say this is what we need to present from a Black community standpoint as far as 3 major talking points. But I don't think it's been a situation where we haven't. So I'll leave it to you all to provide insight on that.
Well, yeah, I'm going to speak of that real quick. And I don't know if you see my screen sharing, by the way, Sister E.
Okay. I think, Charles, when is your video? You ready or what?
No, I don't have a video. As I said, I didn't prepare a video. I
Oh,
just
okay. I thought you had one.
talk about the great betrayal of 1877, which I did.
So
Okay, that's what you. Okay.
So to speak to what you all are just talking about, voting block, and it's been the last time the black community came together strong as a voting block was back during the civil rights era. That's been the last time. We can't even agree on anything right now in the black community because everybody's got social media and everybody's are experts. You know, everybody forget about history. They don't care about none of that stuff. So a lot of black folk are all over the place. And I'm not saying that it can't happen, but the reason these other groups get stuff done is because they come together as a block. And like Charles said, they may come as 15, 20, 30% from their community, or they may represent a larger percentage of their community and say, hey, these are the things we want. Just like the gay community, when they was pressing Obama, they came and pressed him. He didn't just do that. They pressed him for that stuff. So I'm just saying we can keep arguing with each other, and unfortunately, sister, I don't think reparations is a priority to some black folk.
I don't want to say it's not priority by some black folks. It's just a few black. We don't have the distinct percentages to say that's not a talking point, because that has been a talking point in the past, even when Dr. King made that statement of, and I'm not quite sure if he was speaking of reparations, but he did say, let's go get that check. And after he said that, that's when that was one of the many things that caused him to become an enemy of the nations, that he said, let's sit down and have that conversation. So I think that has been some level of a talking point, especially now. That's become a major talking point of the black community. What do we want to say when it comes to reparation? So
but if I can play this video, I got two that are short. This one I think is like probably 10 minutes at best, and then the other one is like 8 minutes or something. So I'll go ahead and play this one. It's going to answer the questions you were asking earlier. Let me know if you guys can hear the audio. If not, let me know, please.
Black Americans vote so heavily Democratic? Well, from 1877 to 1960, the Democratic Party held a virtually unchallenged grip on the politics of the South in a period known as the Solid South. This control would begin to loosen as the Democratic Party would gradually shift its position on Black civil rights. 1964 to 1994, the South underwent a gradual transition from the Democratic Party to a Republican stronghold. Democrats and Republicans in the past were not as ideologically unified as they appear today. There was a time when there were conservative Democrats, especially in the South, and liberal Republicans. During the 1930s, Franklin Roosevelt created the New Deal Coalition in its efforts to combat the Great Depression, unifying labor unions, rural Southerners, and different minority groups under a collective force to support his agenda. His administration even recruited some liberal Republicans to that coalition, resulting in the formation of the Black Cabinet, which was a group of Black leaders who served as policy advisors to the president. Simultaneously, a conservative coalition emerged, consisting of conservative Democrats, especially in the South, and some conservative Republicans. These two coalitions remained active into the 1960s, prompting some Southern Democrats to switch over to the Republican Party. This dynamic led to a more progressive Democratic establishment in conflict with the conservative Southern voting bloc in matters such as race and social welfare. After the 1948 presidential election, President Harry Truman made an explicit appeal to new civil rights measures before Congress, including voting rights protections, a federal ban on lynching, and bolstering civil rights laws. Because of this, he faced a break from Southern Democrats who formed a states' rights Democratic Party under Southern Governor Strom Thurmond. Strom Thurmond's ticket won almost 1 million votes and 39 electoral votes taken in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and South Carolina. Nonetheless, Harry Truman was successful in winning the election with 77% of the Black vote, and the number of African Americans identifying as Democrats would progressively increase. This surge of Black solidarity for the Democratic Party led to an electoral advantage for the party and the implementation of racially progressive policies. This shift caused white segregationists to consider a third-party presidential bid, indicating they were searching for a new political home. This exhibited some of the first major weakenings of the Solid South. And in the 1952 and 1956 election, Dwight Eisenhower's GOP began to make further inroads into the South. Southern Democrats were instrumental in the segregationist movement opposing Black civil rights during this period. Virginia Governor Harry Byrd established the Massive Resistance Campaign to combat school desegregation, and 99 Southern Democrats endorsed the Declaration of Constitutional Principles that was the Southern Manifesto, an objection to desegregation initiative. Strom Thurmond ran an individual filibuster of the 1957 Civil Rights Act, which lasted over 24 hours, and notable segregationist figures such as George Wallace of Alabama and Ross Barnett were both Southern governors. During the 1960 election, Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy had similar perspectives on civil rights. Nixon garnered almost a third of the African American vote, but it's important to realize that majority of African Americans resided in the South where they could not exercise their right to vote. Also during the 1960 election, frustrated Southern electors from 14 states that had cast their ballots for John F. Kennedy during the presidential election declined to cast their vote for him, instead voting for Harry Byrd, who wasn't even a candidate. This election marked the last time a presidential candidate was able to receive more than 15% of the African American vote. In 1968, the presidential election saw another major shift into the South as the region continued to abandon the Democratic Party. Only Texas, the home state of Democratic nominee Hubert Humphrey, voted for him in this election. George Wallace, running on a campaign of only white supremacy for the American Independent Party, was successful in gaining 10 million votes and 46 electoral votes in 5 southern states: Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. After 1968, the South would continue to support Republican candidates, voting for Richard Nixon in 1972, Ronald Reagan in 1980 and 1984, and Bush in 1988. Meanwhile, African Americans were already heavily voting for Democrats. At no point after 1936 did a Republican candidate get more than 45% of the Black vote. The GOP would then employ the Southern strategy to capitalize on racial tensions and gain a crucial foothold in the South. This strategy, developed by political strategist Kevin Phillips and implemented in Richard Nixon's election campaign in 1968 and 1972. See, in 1965, the enfranchisement of Black voters in the South and the strong support of the Democratic Party caused conservative white Southerners to lean even further towards the Republican Party. Additionally, the party began to use coded language such as law and order and states' rights to target conservative white Southerners who were resentful of the racial integration and fearful of urban unrest. Despite this, many Southern Democrats still won state and congressional elections, most significantly less dramatic election for governor in Georgia in 1966. However, the progressive and multiracial Democratic Party establishment, coupled with the successes of Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan's administration, gradually moved conservative politicians in the South more towards the Republican Party. This all culminated in the Republican Revolution in 1994, when the South became a firmly Republican region. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party strengthened its bond with Black voters, leading to groundbreaking establishments such as the election of Douglas Wilder as the first Black governor in the United States. Even Jesse Jackson's 2 unsuccessful presidential campaigns in 1984 and 1988 were instrumental in producing the necessary amendments to the Democratic Party's platform, further increasing the number of Black representatives, mayors, and other elected officials. As a result of all of this, identity politics has now become fully entangled with partisanship. The Republican Party is now attracting more white voters than ever, while Black voters have become increasingly connected to the Democratic Party. What if I told you the story about how these two actually became friends? Well, September 4th, 19...
Yeah, that's a different story he goes into, but I have a little bit about the Southern strategy, and it's a short video. I can play some of that.
Oh, I
My
thought you had
screen
something
should
else.
it should be sharing. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
The Southern strategy, which is a political strategy that's embraced by the Republican Party, really beginning in the 1950s, but big time in the 1960s and all the way up through the 1980s. And some people would argue today, in order to gain white Southern votes and also white suburban votes in the North. But the two big words I'm going to use are de-alignment and realignment. And in political science terms, that just simply means at certain points in American history, groups of people de-align from political party because that political party stops representing their interests. And if the other party is smart, they'll do something to attract that group. And that's called realignment. So when we're talking about the Southern strategy, now I'm going to use the words in a sentence, we're talking about the de-alignment of white Southern voters from the Democratic Party and them realigning with the Republican Party. And that's kind of the way it is now for the most part. And of course, this is a broad statement, but the Democratic Party kind of represents more of the interest of the northern states, and the Republican Party maybe more of the southern states in a very broad way. That's opposite land of where we used to be. So, of course, if you know your history, you know the Democratic Party was born in the South. It's the party of Andrew Jackson. It's the party of slavery. It's going to be the party of Jim Crow. We're racists, right? That's what we're talking about. But yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, it's a party of populism. It's born out of kind of the anti-elitism, the fear of the big banks and the Northerners and industry controlling big government. They're all about states' rights for economic reasons, but also maybe a little bit of the slavery as well. They don't want slaves being free and such. So they believe in this states' rights concept. So if you're a white Southerner, you're definitely a Democrat. If it's before the Civil War and probably after, you're a Democrat. And the Northern Republican Party was founded by Abraham Lincoln. And it was founded on the idea of having a strong federal government, saving the Union. And eventually that's going to mean ending slavery. So if they're going to end slavery and give blacks the right to citizenship and the right to vote, and you're a white Southerner, you're not liking the Republican Party. So to have something happen where you're going to join that political party that fought you in the Civil War, we have to have a strategy. Something has to occur. So following Reconstruction, we could see right away the Republican Party, they have all these freed blacks that can vote for the Republican Party, but they're not going to focus on their issues. In fact, in 1868, when Grant ran, they only gave 5% of their war chest to Southern races. They weren't really interested in that. And in fact, as time goes on, they're going to give up on the South, and they're really just going to utilize the Republican Party of the South really for nominations for the president. Then they're going to concentrate in the North on getting votes. And that's going to allow those white Democrats to coalesce and control the South. That's called the solid South. All through these elections, as you're seeing me flip them on the board or as you're seeing them in front of you right now, you can see that the Democratic Party always wins the South. They always win the South. We should also mention that this means the Republican Party, although they might be kind of taking for granted these African Americans who belong to the party of Lincoln, they're the ones that, for the most part, are supporting civil rights. Even when we get to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, it was more Republicans that supported that than Democrats. But something occurs, and it really happens in Texas in 1956. Now, remember, 1954 is a watershed year because that's Brown versus Board of Ed. That's going to wake up white Southerners to the idea that change is a-coming and you ain't going to like it, namely integration. So in 1956, something interesting happens, and it's a race in Texas, a congressional race based in Dallas. Bruce Alger was his name, and he had won in 1954 as a Republican in the South, but he was a moderate Republican. His stance on race was one of gradualism. Like, it's going to occur. Let's work with the tides of change. And then he made a strategic change in 1956. And as a Republican, he ran as an avid segregationalist. And part of this wasn't because he had a change of heart, but was because there was a change in the community. And namely, this had to do with the First Baptist Church in Dallas, which was run by the guy by the name of W.A. Criswell. And this was a man who believed that the Bible verified that we should be segregationalist, and the people in the communities ate this up. And this sends a message in Texas that this is the thing the Republican Party.
I'm gonna pause for 1 second.
And then John Towers in 1961 becomes a senator all the way up to the
Pause 1 second, Jay. I got a
1980s
point
in
to make on
Texas.
that one. I got to be careful too because they'll hit you for playing nonstop videos. The thing is this: he's more so speaking about the concept of integration versus segregation. Correct? Jay.
I'm sorry. Ask that question one more time.
He's asking. He's delving more into the concept of integration versus segregation, right?
Yeah, that's part of it. Yes.
Yep. I kind of figured that, and you can continue on because I'm a firm, avid believer that integration was the worst thing they could have done with the Black community.
Yeah,
that was the worst thing. Segregation took the power of our dollar out of our neighborhoods, and
yes.
but again, I you can finish with this, but yeah.
We can have on a different live. Maybe we can have a conversation about integration and desegregation and the impacts of that and why. And I'll give my ideas of why I believe that was a big deal back then. You know what I mean? Not so much now, but yeah, I'll go ahead and finish playing.
Yep. And let me say something. Everybody keeps saying Trump is Project 2025.
So now
Trump is not Project 2025. That's the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation built Project 2025. I've heard people in the comments say that. Not saying to you, Mike, but Mike said that he was going to push Project. He didn't. I think his is called Agenda, some type of agenda, but it's not Project 2025. I think it's the Heritage Foundation that came up with that.
Yeah, his official policy is the 2024 Republican platform, which got a lot of Project 2025 in it. So people can go and look up the Republican 2024 Republican platform for themselves.
I think it's called Agenda 47.
It could be, but I know if you type 2024 Republican platform, that'll definitely come up in the PDF form.
Yep, I got it right here. So okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
As we move into a national model, the Republican Party has probably taken notice that this worked in Texas. So first in 1964, LBJ is going to crush Barry Goldwater. Now, Barry Goldwater is not a racist, but Barry Goldwater is an avid ideologist, and he believes with all of his heart that states' rights is the way to go, that the Constitution should be read strictly, that we shouldn't have big government programs like Medicaid and Medicare, and we shouldn't have the federal government getting involved in elections and civil rights. That should be left to the people. Did I say not go for civil rights? I did. But that doesn't mean he was a racist. But in 1964, as you look at that map, Barry Goldwater gets crushed everywhere except for the Deep South. A Republican just won the Deep South, got crushed everywhere else. But if there's a way, the Republican Party thinks to itself, to take advantage of this concept that his ideology got those racist votes and he wasn't racist, maybe we can come up with a strategy like that. And that's what Richard Nixon does in 1968, and he's pretty successful. Now, in 1968, as you look at that map, you can see that he doesn't win all of the South. We have George Wallace running as an independent. He's still a Democrat, but he is de-aligned, creating an independent party, and he is sucking votes away from Richard Nixon. This shows you that those white Southerners, they do not want to vote for a Republican if they can help it. But they're not going to vote for a pro-civil rights Democrat either. So basically what we can boil this down to is that the Southern strategy is kind of using what's called dog whistle politics, where rather than saying racist things and being a racist, you appeal to the issues that appeal to the racists. So for instance, you talk about states' rights. Ronald Reagan, when he began his campaign, I'm not saying he's a racist, but he begins his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi. This is where 3 civil rights workers were murdered by the Klan. And he starts his campaign talking about states' rights in Philadelphia, Mississippi. That's kind of the idea of the Southern strategy. Now, Richard Nixon called it the silent majority, and he's not only appealing to these Southern whites with these issues, but also kind of urbanites and suburbanites that are white in the North as well, kind of the Archie Bunkers of the world. If you've never seen Archie Bunker, watch All in the Family. You're going to love it, kids, I'm telling you. So this Southern strategy, it might be about being against busing or being for tax cuts or for welfare cuts, things that appeal to the racist without saying racist things. So the way to best summarize this is to actually listen to the words of some of these campaign managers and strategists that used this strategy, the Southern strategy. And one of them was Lee Atwater. And he was kind of the bulldog of the Republican Party. She's kind of the brain behind the operation. And you can hear him right now talking about the Southern strategy.
You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts your backfire. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you get so abstract now. You're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things. And the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than white.
So when Richard Nixon is talking about the counterculture and how we need law and order, to Archie Bunker in the North, that means we have to, make sure these kids aren't smoking dope on the street. But to that guy in Mobile, Alabama, who's a white Southerner, that means not letting these African Americans getting out of hand. He didn't have to be racist to say that, to appeal to the racist. So when Ronald Reagan says we need to go after the welfare queens, he didn't call out African American women in a racist way, really. But that's what white Southerners heard. At one point, it was said that Reagan was testing phrases. And when he referred to young black men on welfare, he at one time tried young bucks. That didn't work out very well. He changed it. You don't want to look like a racist. You don't want to sound like a racist. You probably aren't a racist, but you need those votes. And that's the idea of the Southern strategy. So what do you guys think? Do you think that the Republican Party actually did employ this Southern strategy? Was it subconsciously that they did it? Were they doing it overtly? Was it a racist thing to do, a non-racist thing to do? Are they still doing it today? What do you guys think about politics? Why don't you leave it down in the comments below? I certainly didn't cover everything, but I just kind of want you to understand the idea of the Southern strategy and how white Southerners who de-aligned from the Democratic Party over civil rights realigned over issues like law and order, welfare reform, and states' rights to the Republican Party in the period of history from 1960 to the 1980s. All right, guys, there you go. I hope your brain's a lot bigger. If you haven't checked it out, you can see we have tons of videos. What are you waiting for? Tell all of your friends. Go to subscribe to Hip Hughes History on YouTube or check us out.
All right, y'all, I dropped the link. Anybody that has questions, y'all more than welcome to come up. That's interesting. That's very interesting. I do want to delve in and maybe we can have another conversation of Kamala's plans, because a lot of her things that she said, and I listened to the DNC, was questionable. Y'all can tell that I am not a Kamala fan. The reason being is when I was listening to her, I didn't hear a lot of things to make me just say, wow, she's getting ready to do something. I'm not a Trump fan either, so hell, I don't know who I'm gonna vote for at this point. Being honest, I'm just sitting here like, I don't know what to do. I'm getting ready to vote for Cornel West, so that's gonna get my vote. But
hey, a sister asked me a question in the chat, and I just want to clarify. I'm not telling anyone who to vote for. I'm just here trying to dispel propaganda.
Quick question.
And share facts. And so I wanted the sister to know that, and then I asked her a question: is she in favor of giving police total immunity? I just want to know if she's in favor of something like that.
So is that immunity inside of Project 2025, or is it inside of Agenda 47?
You may or may not find it inside of those specific words inside of Agenda 2047, but Trump has said it out of his own mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely something he wants to do. And he said out his mouth several times, not just once or twice. So what does giving police total immunity look like for the black community? Man, they can butt you upside your head and nothing you can do about it. They can butt you upside your head for no reason. They can pull you over, search you. We know about, they want to bring stop and frisk nationwide. I'm just giving the facts of what they've said out of their own mouths. And if you got a police that violate your rights, if they have total immunity, nothing you can do. All they'll say is sorry. You can't sue them. You can't do anything.
Well, I mean, I guess for me, and going back to the topic of our toxic relationship with U.S. politics, and how do we get out of this? I think the only solution is a third party. For me, as I articulated before, the Democrats and Republicans who basically kind of switch sides between being a fascist and being paternalist is not healthy for us. Yes, I know Republicans were they were the abolitionists, but like I said, just like with the Democrats today, they were paternalists. They really didn't want us enslaved, but at the same time, they weren't talking about upliftment of Black people. Matter of fact, some of them wanted to deport us after we were free from slavery. So for me, I think the problem is that both of these parties are rooted in Black inferiority.
Yep.
In different ways. Now, mind you, if we have to engage in the way the politics is right now, yes, Kamala Harris would be, the obvious choice over the fascist Donald Trump. However, from my political perspective, it's picking the shortest midget. Right. So for me. And we have to, and see, this is the problem and why we're in this situation, because of the fact that we're not politically educated. Matter of fact, we're not even encouraged to be politically educated. And this is something that has been happening for decades, probably almost, for the last 50 or 60 years. And civic engagement, civic education is slowly being taken out of schools, if not completely taken out. I see they're trying to bring it back in because I know when I was coming up in school, that was a requirement. Matter of fact, we had to pass Constitution tests in order to get our diplomas or graduate from 8th grade. And so I think when we look at politics now, especially when you talk about the Democrats and Republicans, which I call the duopoly, I'm hesitant to say that they're the same, but actually there's nuance into this conversation, because there are policies that affect us that they both agree on. And I want to bring up 5 points that I think Democrats and Republicans agree upon. Number one is foreign policy. I don't understand why we as a people here don't concern ourselves with foreign policy. Because if we look at the domestic issues that's happening here, like immigration, that's a foreign policy issue. Why are so many people coming from Venezuela? Is it because that our government has been trying to destabilize Venezuela for the last 20, 30 years? And so when you get this destabilization, when you get economic sanctions, which is basically warfare, economic warfare against the nation, you're going to get refugees, not immigrants. I don't call them immigrants. They're basically refugees coming from a place of destitute, because no government will want to trade with them. And that is the most prominent thing about GDPs in different countries, is that they're trade. So when you got the U.S. government blocking trade from Venezuela, you're going to get destitute and you're going to get desperation from the people coming up here. So foreign policy is a thing that's agreed upon by Democrats and Republicans, because they're imperialists. They want the United States to control the entire world. Yep. And the second point I want to talk about is social upliftment for Black people, which I think they both agree upon, because neither party is in full agreement on reparations, which I agree upon. Yep. And so we you have the Democrats who want to talk about it, but nobody is really implementing a strategy on reparations. So to me, it's not a serious conversation with the Democrats, and the Republicans don't even want to talk about it. Number 3, no economic development for the poor. If you notice in these presidential debates, nobody talks about the poor, which we have a significant amount of people in this country. Number 4, support of capitalism, support of big businesses. Both Democrats and Republicans are supported by big businesses. When you see Obama getting millions of dollars in campaign funds, from Goldman Sachs, who also support the Republicans too, because they're playing both sides of the spectrum. Because these are the real policymakers when you think about big business, and these legislators are influenced by the big businesses. And then for me, the 5th one is both parties support a police state. Now, when you talk about police state, yes, the Republicans do want to keep qualified immunity. They don't want any of the police force, when they shoot unarmed Black people, to be punished for that. But then at the same time, you got the Democrats who are supporting Cop City, which is in Atlanta.
Yep.
They're supporting the militarization of police force. So while this is a different aspect of it, both parties are supporting a police state. So when you look at it from those 5 points, that's where I see the commonality of these parties. And that's why I'm saying a third party, which is not going to happen overnight. A third party has to be formed, and it can't concentrate just on electoral politics. It has to concentrate on policies, and it has to concentrate on politics. So to me, the only solution is the third party.
Because you called out key facts, key things that we need to have that needs to be brought to everybody's attention. Because last time I checked, it was during who was the president at the time when they created the board to review reparations? Was that during Trump's watch, wasn't it? Or was that during Obama's watch? The board.
That was
way before then.
That was way before then.
Yeah. No, what was the lady? She just died though, and it was a whole board, and they built this board.
Sheila Jackson Lee.
Yes. Yeah. When was that? When was that board? When was that?
2000s or 1990s or something.
Yeah, that was like in the 90s.
Okay. And who was in the presidency at that time?
Yeah, Clinton.
So with that being said, that was a Democrat. When we were constantly having these conversations about reparation, and there was no decision point made. So we've been talking about this and I'm a firm believer in reparation as well.
We've been talking about this since slavery ended. So,
we've been talking about this since slavery ended, but yet and still, it's really become a talking point in the past decade. And there has not been any traction made since then.
Right.
And my biggest concern is we've allowed that beast to be able to just go to sleep and forget about that talking point, because that's my top one right there. If we want to talk about bringing something into the Black community, bring about something that is owed to us, which is reparation. It's not a thing of you're giving out anything. You're not giving out anything when you're dealing with the concept of the economy as we know it within the U.S. is made based off of the slave trade. The slave trade was one of the biggest commodities to be able for the U.S. to be as big as a powerhouse as it is, because you're talking about 200 years of free labor, pretty much.
Right. Well, I want, for the record, I am definitely pro reparation. So I just want to put that on the record first. But I have a nuanced view, and what the nuanced view I have is, what does it take for us to get there? You know, understand what I'm saying? So me wanting it and me wanting us to have it, and what it'll take for that realization to come to pass, it's a hard road. And primarily because when I was saying this earlier, the sister didn't understand. There's some Black folk that don't think we should get it. There are some Black folk that think, the folk who should have got it was our ancestors, which they don't understand debt. A debt is owed by the United States government, and that debt was never paid. Now, ironically, the U.S. government paid former slave owners reparations for having to let us go, or having to let our ancestors go. They got reparations, but the former slaves got nothing. They never got their 40 acres and a mule. They never got anything. So in today's climate, you don't have enough Black people on board for reparations. It's the point I was trying to make earlier. And we're not pushing hard enough. On top of that, whether they're a Republican or Democrat, it's too many white folks that oppose reparations. I'm just keeping it 100. Congress is not going to pass a reparations bill as long as the majority of white Americans oppose it. So what can we do as Black Americans? Yeah, we can force their hands. We can make some of them come to a realization that y'all ain't gonna win elections without us, whether they're whether they're elected officials or just average Joe voter, and say, hey, they're not going to budge without this being addressed. Y'all not going to win elections. And if there's a 15, 20, 30% of black voting bloc that'll say on these issues, like Brother Charles was saying earlier, on these 3 issues, we're going to swing voters. And it's not just the White House. What people have to understand, we have to vote down ballot as well. You have to vote Congress. If you want reparations, you got to put people in Congress that are going to pass those bills. You can have a president that want to pass a bill all you want. If Congress will not pass those bills, it's not going to happen. So as of right now, Democratic Congress is not going to pass a reparations bill. And sure enough, a Republican Congress is not going to pass a reparations bill. But if somehow in the next 10 years, one of these Congresses, or they're proposing to play ball with us on those things, on these issues, that Congress will win a lot of black votes, and so with the president that's in line with that Congress. That's the point I was trying to make. So I'm not saying we should forget about reparations or we shouldn't talk about it. All I'm saying is that we got a lot of work to do if we really want reparations. We got a lot of work to do, and we got a lot of people to push hard, and we got some black folk we got to push. Honestly, because they are on that. I don't know what I don't know. I have some conversations with black folk about reparations, and their ideology is just weird to me. But it's a debt that's owed. That's what I tell them. That was never paid. You can say, well, that was your ancestors. You were never on a slave. I sure wasn't, but my great granddaddy would have passed some of that money down, or would have passed some of that land down, and we don't know how that would have impacted our family. We don't know how that wealth could have impacted our family, or what they could have did with that. So, yeah, debt is owed. It should be paid. And no, I'm not asking my neighbor next door to pay me anything. The federal government owes that. That's the argument.
When I want to bring y'all back, and it includes Charles and anyone else want to be involved, and it goes back into support of the black community. Have y'all ever seen this?
Yeah.
So what are y'all thoughts on this? Just quickly.
Yeah, I seen it too. My thoughts on it. It was just pandering to get black votes from a desperate politician at the last minute. And it almost kind of looked like that thing that Ice Cube brought to him.
Yes, I'll say this.
No, I say I agree.
I really, as much as I want to say this is pandering, regardless, this is the most information I've ever seen come from any politician, if it be by way of Ice Cube. It still was the most that I've ever seen. We can't make the assumption that he wasn't going to implement it, because he never made it into office. I think this was a conversation that he was going to push into his second term, which was the Platinum Plan. So we can't make the assumption that he was just pandering, but this is the most I've ever seen. And y'all tell me if I'm wrong, coming from any president to say this is specifically tied to the black community.
Oh, well, yes, but here's a question. Would the Republican Congress pass any of this stuff?
Don't know. They're making assumptions.
I can make an assumption based on their history and their record, and especially this MAGA Republican Congress ain't passing. They're right now, they're at war with DEI and civil rights. So they're most definitely not getting ready to pass no.
But you can't deny that somebody, regardless of the fact of what we think far as what Congress is going to do. I've never seen, when someone showed me this, I have never seen this much detail put into this is what is going to be given to the black community. Meaning this is what we're going to do for the black community. I've never seen a Democrat nor any past Republican bring anything to the table like this, regardless of the fact that even if Ice Cube had a hand in it, that's fine. But yet I've never seen anybody bring this to the table.
Well, when I say Ice Cube had a hand in, meaning Ice Cube met with the Trump administration and he presented his plan. I forgot what he called his plan. And so Trump officials or whoever his people were took that and wrote up their own and called it the Platinum Plan. It's totally pandering to me. I don't believe anything Donald Trump says. For number one, He was desperate. Would he have implemented this stuff? How could he without Congress? But let's just say, for the sake of argument, he could. I don't think he would. And it's based on his track record and what he's talking now. He's not talking about any of this stuff. He's not talking about doing none of this stuff. He still got that platinum plan on somewhere in his server. He could be talking about it right now. He's talking about none of this stuff because it wasn't real. It was just a way to try and pander to black people to get them to say, "Oh, Trump's gonna do all this." But even if he wanted to, he couldn't without Congress. Is my whole point.
My thing is this: I've seen it from both sides. Both sides are pandering for the black vote. But again, it goes back into the toxic relationship between politics and black people. Nobody is, even when people, let's say, nobody said that there's no plan. We see this plan right here. I don't know if he's going to implement this plan if he goes into office or even utilize this plan. But there is a plan that's sitting out there that nobody talks about. And we got
not even him.
I mean, we don't know. I mean, he doesn't. I don't want to know. I don't want to say that he isn't talking about it now. Being honest, this is the first time both of them have really talked about anything dealing with politics and as far as their presidential race in the past 3 to 4 months, 6 months. Really, neither parties really said anything. Nobody ever presented anything. Just here recently, from what I've seen, that they're starting presenting plans and discussing plans when it got close to the presidential race, because we got less than 3 months. But somebody said he has talked about it recently.
Please provide the video of him talking about the platinum plan and him implementing that, and him and Congress, and what he's going to do to get Congress to pass it. I'll definitely be interested in seeing that because I don't think it exists, but I could be wrong.
And with this plan, I'm not. It's like I read it already, and I'm looking at the screenshot here. There's nothing on reparations. 3 million new jobs for the black community. Are these jobs going to provide affordable living?
They're black jobs, brother.
Well, that means that they're not going to provide affordable living because that's why people play. I think we talked about this earlier about playing with the unemployment rate. Yeah, people are getting jobs, but what good is working at Walmart when you living in Chicago, where rent, even in the poorest neighborhood, is $1,200 a month.
Yep.
So what difference does that make if I have a job? If I can't pay, and then let's not talk about somebody being married and having children. How could I afford that? So
that's why I got confused with Kamala talking about building 3 million homes. I think she said 3 million homes. It's not the amount of homes that we need access to. It's plenty of homes out there. It's the cost of it. It's the cost. You can build as many homes. I think that's one of her plans, and I'm looking at it. New housing. Harris is calling for the construction of 3 million new home units for her first 4 years in office. The Biden administration has previously called for the construction of 2 to 3. So what is building new homes for me when I can't afford them? That's why I was like, I don't care nothing about your homes. If I can't buy the house, I don't need it. Housing right now is ridiculous right now. When you can look at the housing market right now, the average house costs you $300,000. $200,000. And that's just, if you get to the 200, you get a cheap house.
And then we're not even going to talk about property taxes, which over here in Chicago, and especially in the south suburbs, property taxes just went up, 200%. So that alone, makes the housing market, really volatile. How is a person who has bought their house, who paid their house, now got to go back to a mortgage because of the fact that they at first they were paying $3,000 a year, now they're paying $6,000 a year for property tax.
Yeah, and her thing saying housing shortage. It's not the shortage; it's the cost of the houses.
Yeah, I think in some areas there is a shortage of housing, but let me also address too. A big part of this problem is gouging. And there's a lot of corporations that were buying up homes, buying up property, and raising and inflating the prices. And that's that's something she did address, but that's something that's been going on. Excuse me, that's been going on since the pandemic.
But
Corporate
that goes back into building
corporate gouge.
regulation.
Well, I was gonna say,
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, I was gonna say corporate gouging, and not just in housing and food and everything. So that's a conversation we probably could have next time about gouging and what the government can do to stop that. Because even though inflation is going down, there's a video I got of how supermarkets have what do you call it? I can't remember the word, but basically they're colluded to keep prices high, even though they don't have to. And if you got all it takes is one, grocery store to bring their prices down to something sensible, and they're going to make it, they're going to mess it up for the rest of. So this kind of coalition thing, and they have this app that they can check the prices of other stores and making sure everybody's on par, within the same price range. What they're doing, they're doing the same thing with housing. If someone's apartment is charging, something reasonable, then you got another apartment that's charging, something outrageous. Then where are people going to flock? They're going to flock to the apartments that are giving you decent rent rates. You know what I'm saying? So if there's a collusion going on, and that's what they're talking about cracking down on. And I'm not saying that I'm going to blame, even the pandemic. I'm not going to blame, Trump was president during the pandemic. I'm not going to blame him for price gouging. I'm not going to blame Biden for price gouging. What I am going to blame them for if they don't take any action and do something about it.
The thing is this, though, regardless of, I think the thing that would help is that what we would call price gouging. Why is there no regulations on these corporations that are buying these houses and raising the cost of housing? That right there, the begin and the end of any economy is the amount of money that the cost of real estate. Real estate tells you the true health of the economy. And right now, the economy is crap right now because people cannot buy houses anymore. So building new houses is not going to help. Put regulation on these corporations and fine them for things dealing with the price gouging. But you're not doing that. And that's my biggest worry with Kamala. Kamala is going to dance around the policies to give people this hope and not dealing with the monster behind the policies. It's these corporations. And I think Gardis brought a great point up. Both sides don't want to fight against these corporations and put any type of regulations there.
Well, we're going to find out. One of them is going to be president. We're going to find out if either one of them has the gumption to deal with it. And I'm not trying to tell people to vote for it, but I don't know. I don't know if Trump has even spoken on price gouging. He talked about inflation, and last I heard, his solution was to pump more oil. That's supposed to bring down inflation. I have no idea how, but I'd be interested to see. It'll be interesting to see if they're going to follow through. Now, we all know from history that politicians will make a lot of promises, and maybe they keep 40% of the promises. But I think price gouging needs to be at least top priority, in my opinion. That's that affects everything: housing, food, the basics of life. So yeah.
I think this is, and I agree. I hate to say this, both parties are concerning to me. Trump, but Trump is the obvious. The biggest concern is Kamala because she's not the obvious. And that's why I'm just like, okay, so when she gets in, what's the plan? And I don't want to keep it. If y'all have to hop off, I understand. I'm just talking right now. But I think this is his plan that we talked about. Where is it? I was sharing it and lost it. Let me see.
And who is that? Tabasco sauce is nasty.
Oh my gosh.
I just want to say two quick things. Number one, there is an inventory shortage of affordable housing. A lot of times when we're talking about a housing shortage, they're actually talking about affordable housing shortage. Neither Trump nor Camilla will talk about that or touch that because of corporate interests. Because of Airbnb and how successful Airbnb was to take market shares from hotels. Hotels are actually ones that now are buying these homes to rent them out as their version of Airbnb properties. So no president is going to touch that.
Holy cow!
Second,
Hotels are behind that, brother.
yeah.
Wow, I
Because
thought it was just corporations in
Well,
general.
Airbnb is not considered hotel. That's not they.
No. Hear me out. Airbnb took a large chunk out of the tourism stay sector. So hoteliers' response was to start buying properties and turn them into their version of an Airbnb.
Yes.
Right? So they did two things. One, they started to pass legislation to make Airbnb illegal, and then two, they start copying the model. That's why we're having a shortage of affordable housing, right? Because there's housing, there's inventory on the market. But when we're talking about affordable housing for people who are at 50K to about 30K, the lower middle class to the working poor, this is what we're talking about when we're saying shortage. Affordable housing shortage, which is a national problem. Then when we're talking about inflation, a lot of the inflation problems have to do with the debuckling of the dollar with Saudi Arabia and the oil. So that will never be fixed. That will never be fixed.
Now the thing is with the Airbnb, I think right now Airbnb now are having financial issues because of the lack of regulations when it comes to the Airbnb homes, whereas there's a level of regulation that comes with a hotel that is not, I think the same as Airbnb. And what's going on, and just from my past experiences with Airbnb, Airbnb can give you anything. The company Airbnb itself is the middleman to the owner.
Right.
They only get a
Right.
small percentage. They don't, Airbnb as a whole is not the company itself buying houses. What they're doing is collaborating with homeowners to say they want to open their house up to the public. They get a percentage of the money from them, but because of that, they act as a middleman, meaning the homeowner can give you whatever they want to give you. You can go to Airbnb, but ultimately it's still the owner's decision, yes or no, if they're going to give you your money back, or yes or no, they're going to fix it. Airbnb
Right,
can't
but-
regulate anything.
But Airbnb now is being regulated because when you look on YouTube, you'll see a lot of people now starting to lose money or making significantly less money in Airbnb because now it's starting to be regulated. And hotels are now buying up prime tourism properties to convert those into kind of Airbnb style hotels.
I'm gonna say I on 100% agree with you on that, because even with the regulatories that they're attempting to do, it's still not enacted, because you still have the situation of Airbnb is not the company; they're the mediator.
No, I know that, but
Yeah.
it's absolutely being regulated. You can do a quick Google search. It's now starting to be regulated.
I just left the
The zoning.
Airbnb and just had to argue with Airbnb about a property that damn near looked like a crack house. And ultimately, this was just 3 weeks ago. And the Airbnb
Yeah.
says that we don't have to make them do anything. The owner still has to make the final call. If the owner says no, you're going to have to deal with it. And this is just a conversation with and going back and forth with Airbnb on a house that I rented. And I had to, and the thing is, even with the refund, the owner still could say no to the refund, even if the house looks like a crack house. And guess what happens? I don't get my money.
I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about regulations as far as zonings, areas that now Airbnb can be in. Before there was no such thing as zoning for Airbnbs, right? You're talking about refunds, so I think we're talking two different things. Because I agree what you're talking about there, but what I'm talking about zoning for Airbnbs, which did not exist, let's say 3 to 4 years ago.
Yeah, I get what you're saying with the zoning, but yet it's still Airbnb. You were saying that Airbnb was buying up, and I'm like, Airbnb is not really buying up.
No. I'm saying hotels. Hotels are buying up.
Hotels
now.
are buying. Okay.
Hotels are buying up the property now. Hotels.
Goddess, you're quiet.
I'm just listening to this conversation about Airbnbs and real estate because, it just goes back to the point about unaffordable housing.
Yeah.
We you can talk about jobs all day if you want to, but can that job pay my mortgage? And so we got a lot of empty houses around here in the Chicagoland and suburbs where they're just basically being abandoned because nobody could afford these prices. And to top it off, I just said a few minutes ago, the property taxes went up. So obviously property taxes go up, property value goes up. And the way they're, and I don't know how it is in some other areas in the country, but the assessment, like the assessment formula is just, it really doesn't make sense over here. Matter of fact, it's for me, it's downright criminal when you think about it, because a couple of years ago they did this article in the Sun Times of a former because out here in Illinois, the county assesses the property values, and we had this guy named Joe Barrios who was caught with his pants down when he asked them what is the formula to assess property taxes, because what was happening was the local media here was interviewing people. There was this one lady who had a house, and I think several estimators had valued her house at maybe $100,000, and Cook County was assessing it for like almost $300,000. But then you go on the north side where all the rich white people live at. They were assessing their property values like 20 to 30, almost 0.5% lower than what the property value is already. And most of the houses on the north side are, on an average over $1 million. So we got that assessor. The assessor was voted out, and then we got this new assessor, and he's doing the same exact thing. So you see all of these high property assessments in black areas, but then in the particularly white areas, property taxes aren't significantly going up as it's supposed to be. And from my understanding, and I'm not a real estate expert or anything like that, but I do own a house, and I know if I make improvements on it, my property value goes up. But obviously there's nothing significant outside of the regular repairs that I did on my house to make my property taxes go up $3,000 more.
Yeah. Yep.
But when we're talking about real estate doesn't outpace inflation because it doesn't cash flow. Real estate just keeps pace with inflation, right? So it's pretty much you just come out like zero, right? Because what you bought it for $100 last year, and now it's worth $150. But what you can buy for $150 today is still what you could have bought for $100 last year. Right, so homes really don't outpace inflation; they just keep pace with it because it doesn't cash flow. Right, to get out of inflation, you have to cash flow.
Okay, well, I'm not like I said, I'm not a financial expert.
So, quick question: go back over that again. So you're saying that, and repeat what you just said.
So what I'm saying is this. When you buy a home, homes keep pace with inflation, right? So as the value of currency decreases, so okay, inflation is like this, right? They measure inflation by the average cost of a basket of groceries, right? If you talk to any economist, they'll tell you in layman's term, the average cost for a basket of groceries. So milk, bread, cheese, eggs, 10 years ago were $2. Today is $20, right? So what I can buy for $2 10 years ago is the same exact thing I can buy for $20 today. So when you own a home, you bought a home for $10 10 years ago. Now the home is worth $100 today. But the $100 that I have today can buy the same exact amount of groceries that $10 could buy 10 years ago. So homes don't help you to outpace inflation. It just makes you not lose money. Understand?
But yet, and still, if inflation happens, the house can, in this economy, you see that the house will devalue, correct? So let's say I bought the house now On the flip side,
Yeah.
I bought the house for $400,000 because of
Mhm,
the high price of housing. I buy this house, but later on the downside, that house may decrease. Let's say later on down the line, they say let's decrease the cost of the house and bring it back down to let's stabilize housing costs. The person who bought that house for $400,000 is going to be impacted by that because they bought it at a
No.
higher rate than it's worth.
And
So
that
it's
doesn't
so
address
it's the
the
interest rate.
property
It's
tax
the in
inequality either, because
right.
that's
It's
what.
gonna be the tax rate and the interest rate because that house that you paid $400,000 for, 5 years from now is going to be worth more than $400,000. Land never depreciates.
It
Never.
doesn't. No, land doesn't depreciate, but the value based by
The
the banks.
house, yeah, I was gonna say, brother, housing prices and value go up and down. So, to give you an example,
Mhm.
in 2021,
Mhm.
I was just filling out offers because people, these investors drive you nuts about your house, and I was filling offers just to see what they will offer for my house at the time,
Right.
and it was, maybe the market was 150, 160,000, somewhere in there. Well,
What did you pay for the house?
huh?
What did you pay for the house?
About the same. And
So
I
you
bought that house in 2011. It was a 3-bedroom with an extra bedroom in the basement,
Hmm.
full size basement.
Yeah.
Yada yada garage. Nice home, big yard.
So
But
let's say
when I'm driving that
you paid.
in
Hey, let
2022,
him finish house house.
in
Okay.
2022, I actually sold it, and that's when the prices of houses jumped. And I sold it for 100,000, 110,000 more than what I paid for it. And just because home prices go up and down like that, so the person, I sold it, but what the person that bought it, what happens when prices swing the other way? As what I was thinking about. You know what I'm saying? So people that are buying houses right now, or they have bought houses in the last 2 years, man, if home prices swing like they normally do, they go up and down, they're going to be upside down. I think that's what Gardis was saying.
Well, but normally you're up and down.
And
from
let me
the
land on this
low.
real quick. I'll land on this real quick.
Yeah.
And interest rates were good at the time, 2022, of course.
That's the driver.
They're high now, but they're coming down to my understanding. But the interest rate wasn't a problem. It's the housing, the value of homes went up right when I sold mine. So that's an issue.
Yep. So land doesn't lose value, but price fluctuates when it comes to the banks that later on down the line can impact you in the long run. Yes, if I buy the land, I own it, that's my land. Great. But if I buy the house at a peak time when the house is 400, let's say I'm a billionaire and I buy houses and I buy them right now when they're at the highest they can be. And then all of a sudden something happens in the market where everything stabilizes and every house goes back to its normal price. I've lost because I bought that real estate at a bad time.
Let's look at the 2008 crash, right? Let's look at the 2008 financial, whatever they want to call it, right? If you bought a house in 2006, 2008, it was worth less, but then 2010, you still can sell it for what more you brought for what you brought in 2006 for it, right? So those things are first they're once every 10 years, and even still, if you wait a year or two, you'll still be able to sell it for more than what you bought it for.
But
right?
if I bought it at where it was an inflation at the time, where the housing market was at a peak, I'm competing with every other house. Let's say I'm selling my house for what I bought it for, 400,000,
Right.
and then houses in my
Right.
neighborhood are worth 200,000. Guess what's gonna happen? They're not gonna buy that house for 400,000, and I'm stuck with a house. Now I can wait until, but the thing is, what I pay for doesn't change. It's still the same. That's what I'm assuming. Regardless of if it goes up and down, if I don't catch it and sell it when it's at an up, I'm at a loss because ain't nobody gonna buy it if it's at a low.
So again, when you buy a home, and let's say a market crash or recession, whatever happens the very next year, even 3 to 4 years later, even the low at 3 to 4 years later, if you sell it at a low, you'll still make more money than what you sold it for. You'll still
Right.
make more money than what you sold
No,
it
you
for.
won't. If
Like
I
really,
bought that
Well,
doesn't even make sense. If I bought the house for 400 and then I sell it when it's at 200, I'm at a $200,000 loss.
but that doesn't happen. That
Yes,
doesn't
it does.
happen.
You're dealing with a market right now that people are buying houses that are at phenomenal prices where they're at
And
300,000.
when what
And
I'm telling you is this, right? So again, let's go to 2008, where the houses plummet, where the housing plummet. You bought a home in 2006. Now in 2008, your home is worth less. The homes plummet. If you wait until 2010 or 11,
have you
you
ever
will
worked in real
earn your
estate?
money back.
Quick question. Have you
Yeah,
ever worked in real estate?
yes. That's
What
what I'm
have you
explaining
what
to
were
you
you
in
doing?
detail.
What have you done in real estate? Because what you're saying
No, I
is
worked
that
I worked in finance and banking. So
so,
I did the financing for homes.
so you're saying that if I buy the house at 400,000 and the market
Mm-hmm.
goes below that, let's say the market goes below that and the
Mm-hmm.
housing market gets back stable, and I buy it at 400,000 and the market gets back stable and the neighborhoods
So
go back at
let
300.
me just say
One
this.
second, let me finish. So I buy the house at 400. Now keep in mind my mortgage and the value of the house when I bought it was at 400. And let's say the market drop, the housing market prices drop, and I try to sell, I'm still not going to be at a loss.
I'm just gonna say this. When I was working at a bank, right? I was working at a bank from 2005 to 2010, right? As one of the loan officers. When the market plummeted in 08, right? When people were underwater or upside down in their mortgages, right? Waited two years later, they're right side up again, depending if they don't have a second mortgage and depending on their interest rate. Right? If you don't have a second mortgage and your interest rate is reasonable, and 2 years after 2008, after everybody was upside down, they became right side up again. And that's what I can tell you.
Yeah, I was going to say too that back in the 90s, I didn't own a home at that time, but there was some of my coworkers buying homes in what we would consider an affluent subdivision, and some of the prices on those homes were ridiculously high in my opinion. They were in the 200 something at the time. I mean, they're like 250, 240. And I was like thinking to myself, man, how are these guys paying, but you'll have, like my coworker and his wife both work, you know what I'm saying? So they were able to afford it. But if one of them lost their job, boy, ugh. But this was the 90s when the economy was good. So, but that's why I'm trying to make a point that home prices do swing. And so I'm in agreement with Sister Ito. If you buy a home that's in, the value is inflated, and prices come down, you're definitely going to be upside down. There's a chance that more than likely at some point in time, prices will go up again. But obviously when obviously when interest rates go low, people who obviously whose credit are good, they'll refinance at the lower rate. But yeah, brother, if it goes up, if it comes down, a lot of folk gonna be upside down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not saying that because again, in my example, I told you in 2008 people were upside down. A lot of folks. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying, overall, when we talk about real estate and the real estate market, it corrects itself, right? It corrects itself. Are we going to have years where the prices plummet? Yes, right. Like I said in 2008, everybody was upside down. Everybody was underwater. But literally 2 years later, as long as you didn't refinance or have a double mortgage or something crazy like that, right? The market corrected itself.
But the thing is,
So
what we're saying is it's not the correction of market. It's just when you stepped out in the market, purchased the house when it was at an inflated rate, will it correct itself and go back to the inflated rate again, or will it correct itself and go back to the stable rate, and the person who bought it at 400,000 will be impacted by their purchase?
it depends on how long you hold the property for. It depends on how long you hold the property for.
Well, we have to ask ourselves the question: who's controlling the market? And for me, for me, I look at the speculators and I look at the tax assessors. These are the people who basically control the values of houses. And going back to the subject of our toxic relationship with U.S. politics, it is basically formed through regulation and policy. And correct me if I'm wrong, one of the reasons why the housing bubble happened in 2008, because regulation was relaxed, and you had all these predatory lenders out here who was able to inflate the market to a point where it basically burst, because not everybody was upside down. I've had my home, at that point for, at least about 10 years. And yeah, my mortgage interest went up a little bit, but not to a point where I was struggling or destitute. And I think that was the case with a lot of people who already had their homes. But at the same time, when regulations get lifted like that, this is when you have a bubble. But then at the same time, the speculators and the tax assessors are one of the main culprits of why Black folks in certain areas get moved around in certain areas. This is one of the key tools of gentrification. Most Black people in these areas that white people want, they get thrown out of their houses because of what? In some or even most cases, because they can't keep up on the taxes, even though some of these people actually own these homes.
Yeah, tax lien. Yeah, the tax lien. Yeah.
Yep. And then it's that's where we go into price gouging. Because once they get these homes, they take the value of that house and say, great example. New York is a great example of where at one time New York possibly had stable prices when it came to housing. They always been higher than everybody else, but not this damn high. But now, by way of gentrification, what they do is overprice the homes to keep people from and I really believe that they do that to keep that certain element out. So a house that possibly was worth $200,000-$300,000 that a normal person could buy is now worth $1.5 million. This is how I see it in New York. Because I've even gone to Zillow and seen a house that's worth you know how they show you a house value as far as how much the house costs, and then right under it, it'll tell you what the actual value of that house is, and you're sitting here saying, this is a major gap. So I think by way of gentrification, it plays a part in the cost of how much that house costs. That house costs trying to keep that element out. And I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, but again, when we're talking about housing and stuff like that, again, it's really about the lack of inventory of affordable housing. What does a person that makes 50, 45K do? Obviously, they're not going to buy a 1 point whatever million.
But there is no affordable housing right now. You're saying that that's more, but the houses that are considered to be affordable housing are the ones that it's the price gouging. It's not the building of affordable housing. There are a bunch of places out here that at one time was considered affordable housing, but by way of gentrification, it's no more considered to be affordable housing, because now they've taken those same houses and increased the prices of it. So building 300 million houses is not going to help the housing market any more than putting regulations on these companies that's raising prices on these houses. That's the problem.
I disagree with that.
That's the biggest problem.
I disagree with that. If you have regulation to build affordable housing with government incentives, you can fix, because right now you have homeless people that have full-time jobs.
If you're gonna build these houses, why build those houses when you can regulate the current? People are not buying houses like they used to buy them. I was just watching the real estate report where they were saying that it's a number of empty houses right now because people can't afford them.
Can afford them, yes.
So instead of building 3 million houses, put regulations there so that the current houses you have can be affordable for people. That's stupid.
Well, that's the problem. That's the problem, because if I'm the owner of one of these 1 point whatever million homes, you can't tell me how much I want to sell it for. That's un-American.
It's not even about being un-American. It's called putting regulation. Because if you know, some of these corporations are the ones that's buying these houses. But how the housing market is ridiculous right now. You can't tell me that an owner is saying it's because it's only based on the value of the neighborhood. And sometimes these real estate companies will say, this is the value of your neighborhood. Sell your house for this. And the house may not be worth this. The $1.5 million houses that I have seen, and I've seen some, look like they're worth $200,000 to $300,000.
I'm not debating that,
So
but my point.
So building 3 million houses is stupid and doesn't make sense to me. If anything, there needs to be regulations with these corporations who are buying these houses to say this is not the market value. The market value is ridiculous right now.
Well, look.
And I hope that makes sense.
From a moral standpoint, maybe, but from a capitalistic standpoint, no. Because yes, corporations are buying homes, and if the government puts a cap on how much this zoning area can sell per square foot, then that's not fair market.
So where are you gonna put these 3 million houses?
Hear me out. But also, if we build 300 million affordable homes, that's more jobs. Also, that's more construction jobs as well.
But the thing is, why are you gonna have construction jobs when you have houses that are half built right now because investors can't complete the work that needs to be done? You got houses right now that are not completely built because investors and construction companies had to stop building these houses because some of them couldn't afford to complete it. So what's next after that? New York has a big problem with that right now, where they have huge apartment complexes. They had to stop because regulations, one coming from the government, was outweighing the cost of building the house. Then also investors, it's ridiculous right now. So all this affordable housing they're building, what about these half-built homes that are sitting empty right now?
Then obviously those half-built homes should be government subsidized so that the middle class can buy them, right? Obviously, that would be the obvious solution, wouldn't it?
That would make sense rather than going to build 3 million houses. That's stupid to me.
What is the middle class?
Huh?
What is the middle class?
Don't nobody know anymore. Hell, it's $200,000 a year.
Exactly. I ask that question a lot. Like, what is the middle class? Because I just, I'm probably not there, but I just want to make sure. Am I in the middle class or what?
Are we borderline poverty right now? The way things are going right now.
Yeah, I guess depending on what area you live in as well. I was just having a conversation with somebody in San Francisco, and they were telling me about a community of people who live in their cars because they can't afford the housing in San Francisco. And these are not unemployed people. She tells me these are actually professional people like nurses, like managers at stores and stuff like that. These are people that work, but they can't afford housing, so they gotta live in their cars.
Yep.
That's what I just said.
It's a scary thing.
But you're speaking to somebody who's experiencing that now. I think that's why I'm such an advocate for the housing crisis right now, that I'm a professional. This is the most money I've ever made in my life. It has taken me months to find an apartment in New York. You know why? Because rent is ridiculous. Purchasing a house is ridiculous. Right now, the owners have power, not the renters. The sellers have the power, not the buyers. And you're in a situation right now that it's so many people trying to buy houses or rent houses that they're price gouging, and they're giving you ridiculous rates on these apartments and these houses to the point you're saying this doesn't make sense. You're telling me, and this is not just in New York, this is happening in Memphis as well in other cities. Apartment that was considered to be a 1-bedroom apartment or a 2-bedroom apartment that probably at one time was $1,500. You're talking about $4,000 or $5,000 for it now. This is why you're seeing professionals dealing with the situations that they're dealing with. I thank God that I found something, but it took me a month. And if you find something that's cheap, guess what happens? Everybody rushing for it because they're trying to avoid the high-end rent or high-end houses. I want to buy a house. I can't buy a house right now. I've had a house before. I've been through the process of purchasing a house. I want to go and get my second house. Guess what happens? I got to put the brakes on it because guess what? The housing market is ridiculous right now, and the renting market is just as worse as the housing market. Because at one time, if you couldn't buy a house, you could easily rent. It's just as bad.
It's collusion.
Yeah, it is.
That's why I said that. It's collusion. You got You try renting a 4-bedroom. I was renting a 4-bedroom house here out in the West Coast in Oregon. $2,500, and that was two years ago. So I don't know what it is now.
Yeah, everywhere's the same. Everywhere.
Yeah, it is. And Sister E and fellas, I got to get off. So I just want to say goodbye. Thank you, Sister E, for having me on. And shalom to the chat.
Thank you.
All right, you all have a good night.
Yeah. Also, I'm heading off as well. But did you get the link, right, that I sent you yesterday? Sister
Yeah, I haven't got a chance to look at it. When we got done, I slept until the wee hours.
But you have the link though, right? Or do I need to send you again?
Email the link to me. I got it saved where I don't lose it because I got it right here because I'm trying to. And you know what? I can just save this link. I can save it. You ain't
okay. Cool.
You ain't got to.
All right.
You're talking about this right here. Are you talking?
Yeah. Yes. So when you get a chance, I'll be very interested to see what you have to say about that. But yeah, I'm gonna head out as well because I need to go to the job I don't have. So.
All right.
Y'all take care.
Hey, brother, before you leave, it was good chatting. I hope you come back. I don't know if you're regular here or not.
Yeah, I'm always around. Yeah.
Okay, good. And by the way, even though I don't like Tabasco sauce, I think that smoky barbecue they got is nice. But
man, I'm telling you, Tabasco sauce, white bread, and some fish, fried fish. That's good eating.
That's old school. Eating. Hey, I got a bounce too, Sister Eva. That's the old school.
Okay.
All right, good people. All right, y'all. That was a great conversation. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. And yes, Sister has found her a place to live. It took me a month and a half, y'all. And actually, it took me 2 months. Oh, saints, it's been a rough ride, a bumpy ride. I think I've had my fair share of Airbnbs and hotels and staying in Memphis to make me lose my mind. So I actually found one. I got a contract. I just got to finish the paperwork on it, and I'm in. So, Lord, y'all don't do hot sauce like that. Y'all know how hot sauce is. But y'all, I have enjoyed this conversation. This is great. I finally found a place. I've enjoyed this conversation. Am I going to the Holy Convocation this year? I don't know if I'm coming to Memphis for that. But with that being said, I'm thinking about doing something, y'all. But I'm gonna have to do it behind a Patreon because if I do it, YouTube is gonna shut me down. I want to do something for the election night. That requires for me to post and share live what's going on far as the election. So if I do that, I'm gonna have to put it behind my Patreon and provide private links. So I may charge a small fee. I don't know yet. I got to figure out how to do the semantics of it. If I did it, it'd probably like $4 or $5 just so that I can put it behind there if I did it. But I want to do it behind the paywall or behind Patreon because I can provide the private link. I'll know who's there and I can manage that conversation because one, I got hit with something yesterday that was stupid, and I can't explain how YouTube hit me with this strike. And when they hit me with this strike, I don't even remember playing that song. I don't even know what song they said I played. I think it was something playing on my phone in the background. You know how you go to YouTube and it plays, or if you go to your game or something and it plays some music. I got a strike for that. And that was so crazy. And I said, I didn't play nothing called Jamming With You or something. And I said, I didn't play. And I said, probably they heard this on my phone. So with that being said, YouTube is on the hunt for me, saints. Why somebody say $5? Whatever, JT Mac. But I want to do a live session behind Patreon, not in the YouTube streets, but behind Patreon on YouTube where I provide a private link. So I'm thinking about the semantics of doing that and how to do it and pull everybody in, and we do this and I'll know who's in the room, who can't report me, because I'm telling y'all, they hit me with a strike. I don't even understand where this strike came from. I try to go to the segment where they said, and it wasn't a strike where I got hit. They just said that you got hit with a strike, and and you're not going to get penalized for it, but you're going to have to cut that song out or edit the song, or you can't monetize. I'm not trying to monetize, but I said, let me go ahead and edit the song before I get hit. I don't know what song they're talking about. Y'all, I've played it, but for some reason, there's a part of the segment on yesterday where you can't hear the music. So if I do it, let me know what y'all's thoughts are. Again, it's going to be behind Patreon, and it'll be a small fee. If I did it, it'll be like $4.99, $5, $6.99. Nothing where it'll be like people are going to be impacted financially. No. But I do want to put it in the back, and it'll be a party, like a election party, and I call it that, where we sit and we listen and we watch the polls, and we got that freedom and that flexibility to talk and interact and have fun without being worried about YouTube hitting us with a strike. So, because I don't think they can hit you with a strike if it's a private link. If it's a private link, they can't hit you. So with it being said, I'm going to do that. If I do that, tell me, 1, if that makes sense, 2, if it doesn't. 1, if that makes sense, 2, if it doesn't. Or better yet, 1, if you support me, 2, if you won't support me. So I don't want people out here saying, look what Sister E doing. But yeah, they hitting me. They hit me hard. When they hit me yesterday, I said, wait a minute. I don't even remember playing this. What are you talking about? So, and I think it's fun where we can all just have fun and I don't have to worry about getting a strike. Some things I can't show when it comes to politics, and all that. Can't play certain things because I know regardless of the fact if I do the fair use, they can still hit me with other things. Like if I play something and the person gets that actually created the song in the background of the actual video, they can say, oh, she's playing something that belongs to me. Bam, and she's making money off of it. So with that being said, I keep y'all posted if I do it, but I was going to call it like election night party, where we can sit and we can watch and we can be real and have a good conversation and don't have to be bound by YouTube. And I may take the whole day off from work to do that so that we can start early in the day to whatever time all of us are sick and tired. And I may have people rotate to do that. And it's just an all-day event for $5, all-day event. Come in, we joking, we having fun. You come in and out, and we can start looking at the numbers and being real and honest with each other. So just let me know what y'all think. If y'all want to do that, I'll go ahead and start planning for that and maybe have something on Eventbrite. As soon as you purchase, you get the link, and then we'll call it election night party. And again, I know none of us are good with politics. None of us agree with politics. That's fine. But we still got to be aware of what's going on because we don't know what's going to happen the next day. If Kamala wins, all hell is going to break loose, I think. I think all these Republicans are already on 10. So, but we shall see. Send me an email if y'all, it's for those who don't want to respond in the chat. Let me know what y'all think. And then we can go from there. But yeah, they hit me with any and everything. So, but I may take the whole day off. And all day, all of us just come in. You keep the link, be able to have access to come whenever you want to come. If you want to leave, you want to come back, it's easy. It ain't no big deal. So, all right, y'all. Much love. Thank y'all so much for supporting me. I'll see y'all later on this week. And we'll go from there. Thank you. And if you ain't subscribed to my channel, subscribe.